Chen Pei was devoted to his family, but his fate was far more tragic than she could have imagined. And so, the ruthless manhwa author decides to kill off his beloved character. All the fans are horrified, and the girl is no exception. At that moment, she was overcome with depression. How could her beloved hero have such a sad fate? She couldn't accept such an ending. For the first time in her life, she decided to express her anger in a comment. The pain was so intense that she couldn't remain silent. However she paid for her words, the girl unexpectedly found herself at the center of the manhwa's events, becoming the heroine Lu Minyi. She was sure that the author had decided to take revenge on her for her comment by cursing her and dragging her into this world where she became part of history. And now she's here in this manhwa and she's about to meet her beloved Chupechik. This is pure happiness. Despite all the surprise and shock, she decided that there is always room for unexpected happiness in life, even in the strangest situations. She promised herself that she would save Chupei. She would protect him from all troubles, including the betrayal of a cruel tyrant. Her plans include escaping from the Lu family. She feels incredibly hungry. She could eat an elephant. She hasn't eaten in so long. In the original story, Lu Minye was an unwanted daughter who was always humiliated by her family, not even giving her enough food. Suddenly, she felt a pleasant smell on her right side and realized that there was a chance to at least slightly satisfy her hunger. There stood Lu Yueqing, her evil sister, who was used to humiliating Minye. She brought food to humiliate her even more. Lu Yueqing was the arrogant and narcissistic daughter of the Lu family. She was the only legitimate child and believed the entire world was hers. Minye had been humiliated by this girl since childhood, pretending to be a fool in order to somehow protect herself. However, when she saw the food, her joy knew no bounds. At least something tasty in this terrible world. But of course, Lu Yueqing couldn't just hand over the food without adding her own dose of humiliation. She offered the spoiled mantou. Wei Qing demanded that Minye eat them, saying that this was the only food she could offer her. The maid tried to warn her that the food might be dangerous, but Minye said nothing. She was already used to it. Minye continued to play the fool, knowing full well that she could throw away this disgusting food when everyone's back was turned. Wei Qing insisted that she eat the mantou quickly, not even trying to hide her mockery. Minye took the mantou and was surprised to notice that the cake was so hard that she could break a tooth. It was a true weapon. The mantou was harder than Lu Yueqing's head itself. She nearly shattered it, unable to withstand the impact. Minye was completely shocked. Why would her sister do such a thing? But the maid immediately ran over, noticing the bump on Yueqing's head. Minye couldn't help but walk over to her sister and pour those rotten mantou into her mouth, making Yueqing feel that it was really terrible. Yueqing was indignant and shouted that it was unbearable, but Minye only smiled and claimed that it was very delicious. The maid was worried that the mistress had been poisoned and advised her to see a doctor as soon as possible. Minye just laughed, insisting that she was not in danger of being poisoned, although diarrhea was a very possible result. Lu Yueqing was loudly angry and threatened to call her father to punish her sister. But Minye calmly replied that she wouldn't be a whipping girl. Minye finally decided to enjoy normal mantou, which turned out to be much tastier because she hadn't eaten for so long that everything seemed delicious. The girl noticed a dog next to her. An is a puppy that Minye picked up on the street. He is her only friend and helper. It's a pity that Lu Yueqing later drowned him in the river. Minye gave Anan food. They often go hungry, so they need to eat. They won't bully her anymore. She's not who she used to be. Well, if they dare to mock him again, they will definitely show them. After this, the lady ran out to her and asked if everything was okay with her. As soon as she arrived, she heard that Minye had brought Lu Yueqing to tears. Yu is Lu Yueqing's personal maid, the only person in the Lu family who was kind to Minye. She noted that Yueqing would probably complain about her to the mistress, and she would definitely face punishment. Even the fact that she was mentally disabled would not save her. They will definitely want to settle the score with her, so it is not at all clear what they should do. She didn't understand how the girl could laugh because she only wanted to cry. Even AU doesn't know that she's just pretending to be a fool. This girl wants to leave her with problems she won't get away with it. But now the lady came up to them with Yue King and said that the punishment had now arrived. In principle, they arrived really quickly. The lady said that Min Yi was brave because she was my daughter-in-law and she did not understand the difference between the upper and lower classes. She didn't understand how this girl dared to raise her hand against the eldest daughter of the main wife. Yue King burst into tears and said that she just wanted to feed Sister Minye mantu, but she suddenly pounced on her. Minye started acting like a fool again and kept repeating some awkward phrases. Yue King shouted at her mother that her sister was insulting her. This child is terrible. The mistress ordered to beat her so that she would not do this again. Sooner or later, she herself will destroy the whole family. AU fell to her knees before the lady and began to beg for forgiveness. She said that Minye was just a fool. She did not intentionally offend the lady. She was punishing her unfairly. So she asked to punish her instead of this girl. The woman couldn't understand how this stupid girl dared to open her mouth at all. Minye couldn't allow this crazy woman to hit her AU. She ordered a Gan and AD to show this woman her place. Ayu said that no matter what anyone said, Min Yi was still part of the Lu family. But the lady shouted that she was just an illegitimate girl, so she ordered that she be taken quickly. They beat Ayu and shouted at her to take her hands off. And then they grabbed her, and the girl decided to shout at them to take their hands off Ayu. She didn't understand how they dared to offend her. The woman asked again what she had just said. Minya started shouting that she had tolerated their antics for too long, but she would not allow AU to touch her. This woman took her for a helpless girl, but she was deeply mistaken about her. The woman was shocked and realized that she was not an idiot, and noted that she had realized from the very beginning that something was wrong here. It turns out she had been pretending all this time. The girl had long wanted revenge on her. Yue King told her mother that Min Ye had fire in her hands. The woman said it seemed to be the power of a sacred beast. There are 5 sacred beasts in this world: Fire Phoenix, Golden Tiger, Sky Turtle, Water Dragon, and Air Killing. The 5 sacred beasts possess the powers of the 5 elements: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Every nation covets the people within whom these beasts reside. Although she still has poor control over the power of the fire, Phoenix, she can create fireballs. The woman immediately ordered that she be seized and taken into custody. Minye told them not to disturb her and use this magic against them. After that, she said that now it was the turn of the lady and her daughter. The lady shouted at her not to come near and started to bully her along with her daughter. Minye said that if they wanted to escape, they wouldn't be able to. It was all fire, so the woman and her daughter realized they couldn't get out of there. Yue King begged her mother to save her because she wanted to die. Minye pointed out that if they wanted to escape, there was a small hole in the wall perfect for the mistress and her little daughter. The woman got very angry and asked what kind of nonsense this was. It was a loophole for dogs. Minye said she didn't have to climb if she wanted to stay here and become a roast pig. So the woman shouted that the girl was sick and begged her daughter to come out quickly. But then the mother got stuck in this hole and started asking her daughter to help her. Wei King tried to somehow pull her mother out, but she couldn't. Minye noticed this and asked her dog, Anan, to help the lady. The dog ran up and bit the woman. It was very painful for her and she started screaming. After that, she finally got out and said that she would complain to the master and he would teach this stupid girl a lesson. And you now realize that this girl had been just pretending all this time. Minye said that it was true. It was just that she was bullied less, and she was just trying to protect herself. Ayu felt that she was very guilty towards her because she couldn't protect her. But Min Ye said she had already done so much for her. In the manhwa, Ayu was often punished by the mistress and her daughter instead of Min Yi. But the girl has the power of a fire phoenix, and from then on, no one can harm them. Au noted that now the master knows that a sacred beast is contained within her, and this is not good. The girl remembered that the emperor was currently searching the country for children with the powers of sacred beasts. Those who were taken away turned into monsters and lost their humanity. To develop the power of the sacred beast, each child is implanted with a magical crystal and subjected to various experiments and tested with spells. However, most children fail the test of magic spells and become monsters. Only a select few can complete the trials, and they gain the powerful power of the sacred beast, becoming a deadly weapon in the hands of the state. In the original, as soon as the head of the Liu family discovered that Min Yi possessed the power of the fire phoenix, he immediately sold her to the emperor. After more than 10 years, Min Yi went through all these cruel, bloody experiments, completely subjugated the power of the sacred beast, and then became the incarnation of the fire phoenix, killing many people and becoming a powerful weapon of the Chuan state. Minya spent her entire life in agony because of these events. By now, the mistress should have told the master everything, meaning he'll be right there for her soon. So, the girl said that she wanted to run away from here, and Au was shocked that she wanted to run away. Minya said that she wanted to escape to the capital and suggested that they run away together. If she disappears, they won't leave it, and it will be dangerous to leave her here. And Yu agreed, because she also felt uneasy about letting the baby go alone. And Yu said that they needed to run to the south, whether it was through then along the arm, and that way they would reach the capital. Her sister Au lives in the capital. She will take care of them. Min Ye was very happy because the capital and Lord Chu Pei would soon be in her hands. The head of the Liu family is Liu Bozhao. He was right to know that Min Ye's body harbored a sacred beast, which could help the family become rich. The woman said that if it were just a little bit more, she would have burned her and Yue King alive. This illegally born girl should not be in their family, and she should be driven away. But her husband hit her and said that now the emperor is searching all over the country for children endowed with the power of sacred beasts. They need to hand Minyi over to the court. Then they will not only receive a lot of money, but also receive a more prestigious title. So their family will prosper. Then the woman realized that the girl was the goose that laid the golden eggs. The master ordered guards to be sent for her. He would go to the district governor. A little while later, the woman ran to the gentleman and said that there was trouble because Min Yi had disappeared. Presumably she had run away. The man was in complete horror and said that things were bad, so they needed to send someone to chase her. He ordered everyone to go in pursuit and catch Min Yi. The Lord would have ordered that you not catch Min Yi because there is a sacred beast hidden in her body. It seems that the girl was here because there are remains of her dress. Shu immediately ordered them to quickly bring the dog here. The dog sniffed and immediately went in the direction where the dress lay. Au noted that they are in bad shape because they need to offend. People are now persecuting them. Minye was shocked and almost choked. She was shocked that they arrived so quickly. Au said that they needed to hurry because they couldn't let themselves be caught. Minye didn't understand at all how they found out about everything so quickly. It's just a curse the hunters from the Liu family ran up to them. The men approached Madame Minye and were happy because they had finally found her and she had made them sweat. They were the Liu family's henchmen, so she was unhappy. The man asked how she could run away because her daddy was very worried about her. Minye asked if they really thought she didn't know because this old man was only worried because he had lost his cash cow, selling his own daughter for the sake of well-being. Such a man was unworthy of being her father. Shu did not understand what the lady was talking about and told her to return home nicely and not make him be rude. Au took out a knife and shouted at him not to come near because she and the lady would not return to the Liu family. The man asked the woman, since when she became so brave, not only did she kidnap her mistress, but she also threatened her with a knife. And Yu told him not to come over because she couldn't vouch for herself. The man didn't quite understand what she was going to do, guys, because she was just a stupid servant. He grabbed her hand and said he didn't understand why she was acting like such a hero. You said he should let her go immediately. But the man simply threw her on the ground and told her to get lost. Minya was very scared, and the man told the lady to be reasonable and return home with them. After that, a rock hit him in the head. The man said he was bleeding, but Shu, you knew that yourself. A youth stood up, grabbed Shu's hand, and shouted for the lady to run faster. He started hitting the woman in the face and yelling at her to let go, and Au said that they shouldn't worry. Shu grabbed the knife and wanted to kill the maid. He crawled towards her shoulder. Therefore, Minya immediately decided to use magic. She screamed that she would finish them all off, but suddenly someone appeared behind her and hit her on the head. It was another servant who told Shu that he was surprised she could start a fire with her bare hands. It was truly astonishing, the power of a divine beast. The second rare power, it is not surprising that they will pay a tidy sum for it. Minya crawled to her maid and tried to wake her up. She begged Au not to die, but it seemed to be useless. Shu approached the lady and said that if she did not want to reconcile the children, then he should return with them on good terms. He said that he would not let her go even if he died, because she was a monster. She spat in his face, so the man immediately grabbed her by the neck and lifted her up. He said she was just an illegitimate girl and didn't understand what she thought of herself, so he would beat her half to death. But suddenly, someone hit him in the hand with an arrow, so he let the girl go to the floor. He did not understand who it was and ordered him to go to his forefathers. The man asked where it had ever been seen that a pack of stray dogs dared to bark at a master, and he ordered that the girl be released. Minye immediately realized that this man was Mr. Chu Pei. Minye hoped that this was not a dream because she was very shocked. Shui, I understood how that bastard dared to hurt him. He would not expect mercy. The gentleman had no idea what this arrogant tone was. They began to advance on him, but Chu Pei immediately drew his sword and easily got rid of everyone. Shu was shocked because so many people couldn't withstand even one blow from him. They were all a bunch of scum. But he decided that he would show him his power, so he launched an attack. A few seconds later, Shu was on his knees begging for mercy. He was too arrogant and didn't know who he was dealing with, so he asked to spare his worthless life. Chu Pei said that he was just a pathetic underling. Shu agreed and even called himself a piece of shit, and believed that the master simply shouldn't get his hands dirty. Chu Pei approached the lady and asked if she could stand up. Minye asked if it was really Mr. Chu Pei. The man was surprised and did not understand how the lady knew who he was. Shu was happy because he was just pretending, and this man just went and believed him. Now the master could simply say goodbye to his life. Minye shouted at him to be careful. Chu Pei noticed everything, so he was able to react quickly, but the girl had already begun to use her divine beast power. The man was shocked when he saw this, and then turned back and saw that the man was already on fire. He threw it into a tree to keep it away from them. Chu Pei presented the sword to his throat and said that he was a rat, and his shamelessness opened his eyes to his essence. Only rats like him attack from behind. Zhu begged not to be killed. Minye asked the master to stop. Zhu was shocked that the lady was trying to save him. Chu Pei didn't understand why she wanted to save him since he had just attacked her. Minye said that she could never forgive him, so she asked the master to put away his sword, because this man killed her only family member. So she is the one who wants to take revenge on him. This girl has a highly developed sense of duty and justice. She has a fiery nature. It will not be easy with her. Therefore, she is a child who was also chosen by the sacred beast. Chu Pei had his daughter in his arms and told her father that she had the power of a sacred beast. Zhu turned to the lady and pointed out that Yu was just a servant. They were not close to her, so he did not understand why she was so angry. Min said that if Au, who gave her life for her, could not be considered a family member, then she did not understand how someone who was willing to sell his daughter to the imperial palace could be considered a father. This is the master's order. He had no choice. Besides, the emperor is still searching for children with the power of a sacred beast throughout the country. The emperor ordered that from that day on, Lady Wu Yun be raised in the palace. She possesses the power of a sacred beast, and the lady is a great asset to the state. Chu Pei didn't want to believe it because Wu Yun was not a national treasure. She was just his little daughter. But he had to carry out the order, so he agreed to it. Min Yi said that those who hurt her loved ones are her mortal enemies. Chu Pei believed that this girl was truly worthy of wielding the power of the divine beast. Yu shouted at the end that she shouldn't do this, but she didn't care, it hurt. Min Ye told Ah Yu that Min Ye could now rest in peace. She had avenged her. The girl didn't understand what was wrong with her body because her strength was completely leaving her. Mr. Chu Pei picked her up and realized that if Yun was still in her stomach, she must be her age now. He ordered them to take the maid home so that she could be given a proper burial. Minye opened her eyes and had no idea where she was. She slept for so long that she thought she fell asleep in the forest. When she turned around, she saw Yue Xing and Xing Mu there. She smiled and realized that they just hadn't grown up yet. That's why they were so small and very cute. They looked at her face. She looked a bit silly. At first glance, there really was something wrong with her. She'd probably eaten some kind of weird mushrooms. Minye then said that she took back her words because they were not cute at all. This won't do. If she wants to stay here, she needs to be on good terms with Yue Sheng and Xing Mu. That's why she said that she wasn't a fool at all, and that's why one guy said that he did it, that after you eat these mushrooms, colorful toadstools grow on your head. The other guy was shocked and said that this was just cool and started looking at the girl's head. This wasn't the impression she wanted to leave. The guy told her to let him see if she had mushrooms growing on her head. Minye asked him not to pull her hair because it hurt, but the guy said that if the mushrooms did grow, he would bury her in the ground and water them. This made the girl angry, and she bit him on the hand. He was afraid that she would bite him too. Minye muttered nervously that she would bite him. The boy noticed that his little brother had been bitten by a fool, so he thought they now had two idiots. Then Mr. Chu Pei entered the room. He was a little surprised and asked what they were doing. The children said that they were beating up idiots. Fu Zhong, who is the manager, sat together with the master, a girl and a guy. Yue Xin asked his father why he brought this idiot here. Chu Pei asked him not to call her that because she had a name and he wanted to call her that then. Well, then he realized that he didn't know her name, so he asked her again what it was. The little girl said that she was Minye and that she had broken off relations with the Lu family, so you could just call her Minya. Yu Xin didn't understand at all why she was here. It seemed like she wanted to ask his sisters to join them. He didn't need such a fool of a sister, because his sister is Ayun and he doesn't need someone like her at all. Ayun is the deceased daughter of Lord Chu Pei. She also possessed the power of a sacred beast. In the manhua, Ayun was also given to the imperial palace because of her powers. In the end, she died tragically in the palace due to a failed experiment. Although the emperor rewarded Chu Pei with money and feudal lands, it is very interesting what kind of riches can dull the pain of losing a beloved child. Mr. Chu Pei will blame himself for this for the rest of his life. That's why Minye came here. She will save Mr. Chu Pei. Minye said that it was true she came to become their sister. The guy was completely shocked and asked her what she was talking about. Minye asked the gentleman to become her father. She would be his daughter. Then he realized that this girl looked very much like his own daughter. After this, Chu Pei began to laugh loudly. Yue Xing felt that this little girl wasn't that stupid since she was so straightforward. Yue Sheng immediately said that he did not agree to this, so his father should not listen to her. Chu Pei said that he understood him and suggested that they all go somewhere together. Xingmu was shocked because ever since Ayu left them, their father had never taken them on a trip. The master ordered that a carriage be brought because they were leaving for Nanxin. The man said that his sons would ride in the first carriage and Mrs. Minye would sit in the second. She is so small and also old, and she smells something strange. Yixin noticed what a mess like her is. This cart is just right. The man told Min Yi that there are different ranks of guests, and their reception, of course, also differs. All guests who are not of the highest rank ride in such a carriage. Xu Pei asked Fu Zhong again if he would really allow Min Ye to ride in such a poor carriage. The man asked the master again what he would order. The master believed he had heard that she was going to become his daughter, which meant she would eventually become the leading woman in their family, and then he would be in trouble. Fu Zhong immediately apologized for this terrible payment. He will immediately order that the same carriage be prepared as for his sons. After this, they mounted their horses and set off on their journey. The girl asked Mr. Chu Pei what kind of place it was because it was very beautiful. Chu Pei said that it was a sea of flowers among the clouds. Among the mountains under the azure sky, a multitude of flowers grow freely, and she could pick one and take it to her maid. Then the girl remembered Yu. This made her feel sad, and she started crying. The gentleman informed her that while she lay unconscious for several days, he had ordered that she be buried with dignity. After that, he pointed to her coffin, and the girl walked up to it and placed a flower there. Min Yi asked for forgiveness because she couldn't protect her if she was a little stronger. Yu wouldn't have left her. Minya read that she was so useless she should have used the power of the sacred beast earlier and saved her. Chu Pei turned to her and said that Yu had rested in peace. There was no need to torture herself. She had done everything she could. She's just a kid, so don't talk like that, and she doesn't need to take everything on her shoulders. He just wants her to enjoy her childhood if she wants to laugh. She can laugh if she wants to cry. She can cry and she can do whatever she wants. There is no need to worry about other things because the master himself was taking care of them. The girl was in complete despair. Her favorite character was truly a very worthy man. Yuexing did not understand at all why father was deceiving this idiot, and Yuexing said that it was because of this that she was crying. Yuexing noticed that when he cried, his father did not hug him like that. Yuexing noticed that when he cries, he starts to throw tantrums, roars like a beluga, and even starts to snot. If he were in his father's place, he would also refuse to hug him. Xingmu collected the flowers and handed them to his father. His master said he wanted to visit Yun and they should play there. The children, of course, weren't against it. Every time their father goes to their sister's grave alone, he never allows them to come there, period. Yuexing asked the girl why she was pretending to cry, but Minye was actually crying. But the guy was sure she was pretending. Minye had already started screaming and said he didn't understand anything at all. She tried to keep things in order with you, no need to curse him out. But he says again that he doesn't trust her at all. He started making faces at her, so the girl immediately started bursting into laughter. Yuexing said that she was just a fool, and he knew that she didn't really cry. Minya told him not to do that because he looked like a fool. Xingmu thought about it and realized that his brother was more of a blockhead than this girl. Minya asked him to stop. It was obvious she was really sad. The guy said that no one forced me to pretend. Yuexing said that she wouldn't catch him, but the girl was very angry with him. Yuexing promised that he would immediately tell his father that she was pretending because she was now laughing out loud. But the guy ran away and was sure that she wouldn't catch him. He didn't notice how he started falling off the cliff. Minya also couldn't stop at all. Yuexing landed and had no idea where he was. A few moments later, he felt something hit him. It was Minyi. The boy screamed and asked her what she was doing because he was in pain, but she was also in pain from the blow. Two men approached them and said that this was their road and the forest also belonged to them. If they want to walk here, they have to pay money. Minya noticed that this bandit was somehow ridiculous. These bandits were so cringe-worthy that it was simply shameful. The men asked why they were staring. They should get out of the way, don't bother them, it's better to go play. Yuexing didn't understand at all what kind of ignorance this was. They didn't even know who they were talking to. He was the second middle son of Mr. Chu Pei Yueshang. Minya thought he was a fool because he told the bandits about his high status, and it seemed like he just wanted to die. But the men realized that they would get rich, so they asked if he really was the prince's son. Yuxin said that of course it was. Now that they knew who he was, they should kneel before him. Well, the men simply grabbed him by the arm and the boy screamed and asked what they were thinking. Minya tried to help him, so she wanted to use magic, but she was also hit from behind and caught. Yuxin said that he was in a lot of pain, so he demanded that those idiots let him go. The bandit leader, Liu Yi, was right in front of them. The boy asked why they weren't responding and demanding that he be released. Minye told him not to shout, as it wouldn't help them. The man told Liu Ye that they were now rich. They had tied up the prince's son. Liu Ye was completely stunned when he heard this. The bandit also noted that this guy was the second son of the crown. Liu Ye thought he was an idiot because he dared to seize the prince's son, and right now they could start digging their own graves. He was simply shocked and asked what he'd taught them. The guys remarked that if you want to get rich, you have to take risks. In principle, this is true. They even kidnapped the prince. They are really risky guys. Apparently, they definitely got rich. They were all very happy. Minya thought about Wang Gulyu, also known as Liu Yi. He's a nervous and bloodthirsty thief in the original manhua. She didn't expect to meet him so early. Yu Sheng called them idiots and said that his father would catch them all and kill them. After that, the chief hit him and told him to shut his mouth because he was a dirty boy. Yu Xing was shocked because the man had just hit him. Even his dad had never hit him. Liu Yi turned to his comrades and said that he had just sworn allegiance to the emperor and was wondering what kind of punishment he should expect. The man asked what he was talking about, since according to the law he was facing the death penalty. Liu Yi noted that this was very good. They now had two options. Either they would get rich or they would die. He noted that they would send the prince the severed finger of this youth. If he did not give money for the ransom, then they would cut off the second one, and it did not matter to me who he was, a prince or just a citizen. He must obediently pay the ransom. Yuxin said that there was no need to do this and started shouting. The boy cried pitifully. Minye decided to ask how much money they were going to ask for. They didn't even know how much the prince had. If it was less, it would be a loss for them. Liu Yi noticed that luck came so quickly that he didn't even think about it. He had never caught such a fat fish before. The girl asked him to simply name the amount. The man said probably 100,000 or even 1,000,000. Then he realized that 5 million would be quite enough. Minya said that the prince would simply die laughing if he threw in 5 million. She noted that his sword alone, adorned with 7 precious stones, was worth 7 million. Liu Yi had no idea how she knew about the sword with 7 precious stones or who she even was. This girl is so small, but somehow her words sound so wise. Another man asked if they were going to cut this boy. The girl noted that they were in the same boat because she too was madly eager to get rich, and therefore asked how much ransom they should be paid. She asked if the 5 million would be enough to escape, and she suggested heading straight to the prince's residence to collect rare treasures. Liu Yi remarked that this indeed made sense. Min Yi said that she could become the prince's daughter, and thought of stealing the jewels from his treasury, but who knew that she would find allies? Yu Xing. Why shout? He knew she'd betray them all along. The girl pointed out that he shouldn't take it personally. This was a turning point. Liu Ye still decided to ask what her plan of action was. Minya suggested using this fool to lure the tiger out of the mountain. She decided to take his jasper pendant and throw it into the gorge. The prince will definitely send a detachment to rescue his son. At this time, they will invade the Jinwang residence. The boy demanded she give it to him because the pendant belonged to his mother. Minya said she knew a secret entrance to the residence. Liu Yi remarked that she was a good girl and decided that's exactly what they would do. He told the two to keep a close eye on the boy, and the rest would go with him to the Jinwang residence. Minya said that they would go to the top of the mountain and find themselves in a residence at the foot of the mountains. Meanwhile, Chu Pei was at his daughter's grave and talking to her. He recalled all the moments with her. He remembered how he said that tomorrow they needed to go to the palace, and believed that she was not afraid at all. The girl said that with her father, she was not afraid of anything at all. Liu Ye noticed that there was a grave here, and another man told him that there was someone at the tombstone. Minye realized that this was her chance, so she immediately used divine beast magic. Liu Ye was very scared because he didn't expect this. They were all on fire and it was very hot. They didn't understand what kind of fire it was, and the girl started running away, calling for Mr. Chupei. Liu Ye was horrified because this little girl dared to betray him. She would pay for it. He was almost there, but Mr. Chupei reacted very quickly. He asked with horror who dared to come to this cemetery. Liu Ye was simply furious and didn't understand what was going on here. Meanwhile, Yue Xing asked to let him go, because when his father came, he would kill them all. The men laughed at them, saying they were his fathers. Yue Xing began screaming at them to take their hands off him. After that, I approached Xingmu and asked if his brother was really some kind of toy for them. Yue Xing was overjoyed to see his brother, and they began to ask who he was. Xingmu said that they seemed to have hearing problems and were some kind of idiots, because he only said that he was this guy's brother. The man was delighted because it was another wallet. On legs, just a stroke of luck. He needed to grab it quickly because his father would pay them even more. Xingmu said that there was a 10,000 silver note on the ground, and he thought that one of them had lost it. They started fighting over this money, and then the brother managed to deal with them. Yue Xing asked her brother how he found it. Xingmu remarked that he'd simply lost sight of them, so he went looking for them, and luckily he found a clue. Yue Xing was surprised and asked what he was even talking about, and then his brother showed him the branch. All along the way to this place, there were burnt branches scattered, and it looked like someone had left such marks. Only one person could do this. Minye, using the power of the fire, Phoenix deliberately set fire to these branches. Yue Xing said that he didn't believe that she was so kind. She deceived them all, and she was a bad person. She got involved with robbers and went to look for her father. Xingmu said that if they went looking for their father, then it was all over. But the boy started saying that it wasn't over yet, and that they needed to save their father quickly. Xingmu turned to his brother again and said that he meant that it was all over for these bandits. He told his brother to calm down because their father was nicknamed the Divine Killer. These bandits already definitely regretted that they got involved with them. Liu Ye was shocked because he killed all his people. He didn't understand how this was possible and why so many people couldn't defeat one. He thought that something had gone wrong, that this was all wrong, that he didn't want to be alone. Chupei said that he should screw it up for the sake of torture. Now it was his turn and called him a transvestite. Liu Ye got very angry, and I started shouting that he would just kill him. But when he started running towards him, he was unsuccessful because the gentleman turned out to be faster. After that, he fell to the ground and was simply terrified. Minyi said that the gentleman was simply excellent. Chupei asked if the liana was okay and if the robbers had harmed it. Minye said she was fine, but Yue Xing was still in their hands here. While they were playing with him, they were captured by mountain bandits, and they captured Yue Xing to make him pay ransom for him, so they needed to save him quickly. Chupei asked her to stop because it was too dangerous there and she should stay here while he went to get his son. But in the meantime, Yue Xing and Xingmu had already run to their father and were very happy. Minye was happy because he seemed to be okay, but Yue Xing stomped on her and told her to move away from him, and he himself went to his father. He tried to tell him something, but his father just hugged him silently. The gentleman asked if he was really okay and if he had been harmed. Yu Xin said they did something bad to him. They beat him and he was in pain. Minya said that if he had told me about his noble origins, the bandits wouldn't have touched them. But the boy insisted that it was all Minye's fault, that they had been captured by the bandits because of her. They continued to argue about who was to blame. Chupei sighed and Xingmu told his father to look at the NATO he was holding in his hands. Chupei asked what it was and why the branch was scorched. Xingmu said they were marks left by Minyi. He followed these marks all the way and found Yue Xing. Thanks to her, he was able to save him, and he also heard that Minyi deliberately lured the bandits to save Yue Xing. Xu Pei reflected that she was truly worthy of the sacred beast's powers. She was courageous and decisive, and her judgment was sound even in the face of danger. He also noted that his son could have suffered as well. King Mumeli said that thanks to the martial arts his father had taught him, victory had been quite easy. His father praised him and said he was worthy of being an older brother. It was already getting dark. He glanced at the others and suggested that it was time to return for a good rest and a proper dinner after a long day. Yusheng couldn't hide his joy when they arrived. Everything on the table looked delicious, and he was sure all these delicacies were meant exclusively for him. A look of joyful anticipation crossed his face, but his joy was short-lived. Yuesheng, looking around, declared that he didn't know who the girl was and therefore she shouldn't stay there. In his opinion, her presence was unnecessary and unwelcome. However, their argument quickly escalated into a heated squabble, as the girl also believed she had a right to the food. She wasn't about to give in, as some of the food belonged to her as well, which only fueled the arguments. At that moment, Xingmu noticed that the house had become noisy again, something that hadn't happened since Sister Yun left. He couldn't help but think of the times when everything was different and the silence seemed unbearable. Chu Pei, watching the unfolding scene, paused for a moment, then turned his gaze to his son, who was persistently taking food from the girl. He wasn't angry, but rather wondering whether he should intervene. Watching their skirmish, Chu Pei couldn't help but smile slightly. He found it a bit amusing how seriously the children took such a trivial matter. However, he knew that this time would be better spent solving more important issues. Finally, he stood up and loudly announced that he had made his decision. Hearing this, the children immediately stopped arguing. Their curiosity got the better of them and they froze awaiting his words. Chu Pei turned to the girl and unexpectedly proposed that she become his daughter. Moreover, he suggested that she take his surname Chen, which came as a bolt from the blue. Minye was stunned. She couldn't believe her ears and asked several times if this was really true. Would she become his daughter? The thought crossed her mind that perhaps this meant staying here forever. This proposal was the fulfillment of her fondest dream. Now she could be with her master. However, his son, upon hearing this, became indignant and began shouting that he categorically disagreed with this decision. But the girl wouldn't tolerate his screams. She quickly approached, covered his mouth with her hand, and sharply told him to calm down and stop objecting to his father's decision. Her actions were not only bold, but also quite amusing. She even shoved a piece of chicken into his mouth to stop him screaming, advising him to eat his dinner instead of arguing. Xingmu and Chu Pei merely watched with a slight smile. They couldn't help but laugh as they watched these two children attempt to settle their differences in such an unusual manner. As Min Yi drifted off to sleep, she couldn't believe it wasn't a dream. She was now considered Lord Chu Pei's daughter. It was like a fairy tale, one she wanted to stay in forever. She silently wished the gentleman good night, but she couldn't bring herself to say it out loud. A warm feeling of joy and gratitude washed over her until her thoughts dissolved into the embrace of sleep. When she woke up, she didn't immediately realize where she was. The first person she saw was Chu Pei. This surprised her as it seemed like it was all part of a dream, not reality. The man asked her if she considered the possibility of being the prince's daughter, saving him from destruction. He mentioned that his family had already been destroyed, and now it was her turn to enter the game. It was Chen Huiming whose appearance suddenly changed the atmosphere. His face was furious and his voice was full of threats. He shouted loudly that she was finished, his appearance terrifying to the point of trembling. Minya woke up abruptly, drenched in a cold sweat. Her heart was pounding and she couldn't immediately comprehend where she was. Looking around, she tried to convince herself that this was all just a nightmare, not reality. The recent events of her life came one after another, and she barely had time to process them. In the hustle and bustle, she almost forgot why she had come to this world in the first place, and what had brought her here. Chen Huiming's name loomed in her mind like a dark shadow. She knew that in 10 years he would become the new emperor. This event would change everyone's lives and alter the fate of the world. His ascension to the throne will be followed by the fall of his predecessor, Da Xuanjing. This moment will mark the beginning of an era of horror filled with blood and suffering. Upon ascending the throne, Chen Huiming will mercilessly persecute all who stand in his way. Innocent people will perish, lands will be conquered, and his reign will go down in history as an era of tyranny and destruction. Minye couldn't accept this outcome. It was unfair, and she knew she had to do something. It was then that she remembered the very review she'd once left on Autoru, which had led her into this world. It was now the 19th year of Emperor Da Xuanjing's reign. Minye knew she had 10 years to prevent Chen Huiming's rise and change the course of history. She was determined to fight future tragedies. Minye vowed to herself. She would do everything possible to prevent him from becoming a tyrant and to protect her new family. A flame of determination blazed within her. She swore to the gods that she would stop Chen Huiming. She was ready to sacrifice everything for her goal and save the world from the approaching chaos. Meanwhile, Chu Pei trained with his son. He taught him to raise his hand and hold it there for as long as possible. This exercise developed his endurance and patience. Their lesson was interrupted when Minye approached them. She approached with visible excitement and addressed Chu Pei as Sir. This immediately caught his attention. Chu Pei looked at the girl and asked her again what she had just called him. Her nervousness became noticeable, and for a moment she hesitated, unsure of the correct answer. Finally, mustering her courage, Minye, blushing slightly, called him Daddy. Her voice trembled, but her eyes held the sincere hope that he would accept her the way she wanted. Yuxing, hearing her, merely snorted and said she was too noisy. He reminded her that they were practicing swordsmanship and her presence was disturbing. Chu Pei, noticing the girl's nervousness, decided to find out what had brought her there. He gently asked why she had come and what she wanted to say, nudging her to open up. Minye, plucking up her courage, announced her desire to study at the Confucian school. Her words stunned Chu Pei. He hadn't expected the girl to express a desire to enter the palace. The girl firmly confirmed her words. However, the gentleman declared this impossible. He explained that he could not allow her to go there despite her aspirations. He added that her sacred beast power was too valuable to risk its exposure. He couldn't lose another daughter, and that was clear in his voice. But Minye wasn't about to give in. She promised that no one would know of her power. Her voice was full of determination, hoping to persuade Chu Pei to change his mind. The girl explained that without training in the palace, she wouldn't be able to save him. If she didn't stop Chen Huiming, they would all die, but she wasn't about to let that happen. Chu Pei was confused by her words. He couldn't understand what exactly she was trying to save him from and why, according to her, everyone had to die. Minye realized it was time to tell everyone. However, as she began to speak, she noticed that her words were jumbled. She found it difficult to express her thoughts clearly. Chu Pei listened attentively to her, but not understanding, asked again what she had just said. He found her speech incoherent and incomprehensible. Yuxing, without wasting a moment, quipped that the girl had probably eaten poisonous mushrooms and was therefore talking nonsense. He called her behavior strange, not hiding his displeasure. Xingmu also didn't understand what was going on. He had trouble making sense of her words. Minye was upset that no one took her words seriously. The girl tried to explain that when Chen Huiming became emperor, he would kill them all. However, her words fell on deaf ears and the master remained perplexed. Chu Pei's eldest son remarked that she sounded like a baby when she spoke. This caused general laughter, but the girl couldn't understand why they couldn't understand her. Minye began to wonder why her words were being misunderstood. She suspected that it was because she was trying to describe future events, which might violate the rules of this world. Yuexin suggested that Chu Pei chase the girl away. adding that once mushrooms started growing on her head, it would be too late. The girl responded by asking him not to push her and declaring that she was talking about important things. Gradually, Chupei began to decipher her speech, and the girl realized that her voice was blocked whenever she tried to spoil the future. This was a surprising discovery for her. Deciding that loudness was power, Minya screamed to get her point across. But it was no use. The only ones who responded to her scream were the startled birds. Chupei was again at a loss. The whole situation was extremely strange to him. He wondered what was happening to the girl and why her behavior had become so incomprehensible. Xingmu suggested that perhaps she had eaten something strange, like those mushrooms. It could have affected her voice or her perception of reality. Minya responded indignantly by declaring that she hadn't eaten anything. She finally realized that spoiling the future was strictly forbidden, and that made things even more difficult. Despite all the obstacles, Min Yi decided not to give up. She once again began to persuade Chupei to let her study. She knew she couldn't deviate from her chosen path. Chupei, observing her persistence, couldn't help but smile. He even felt a little awkward because the girl was too sweet to refuse. Chupei felt as if he were ready to fulfill absolutely any wish this girl had. There wasn't the slightest doubt in his mind. He could do anything she asked, and nothing seemed impossible to him for the sake of her smile. The girl couldn't hide her delight. Her eyes sparkled with happiness, and she asked with a hint of excitement if this was really true. She wanted to make sure her dreams could come true. The gentleman smiled, but added with some seriousness, he would fulfill any of her wishes except one, enrollment in the palace school. This was a matter of principle for him. The girl tried to object, to voice her arguments, but her father interrupted her. With a stern expression, he made it clear he had said all he could and would not repeat it again. Her father categorically forbade her from mentioning her dream of studying at the palace. He considered the conversation off limits, and reminding her of this desire only irritated him. Yuxing added with a chuckle that his father was right and that fate hadn't destined the girl for the palace. He even called her a witch, implying that it wasn't her place. But his cheerful mood vanished when he saw the girl standing there in tears. Surprised by her reaction, he began to haltingly console her, asking her to stop crying. Yuxing earnestly begged her not to cry, claiming that it was unpleasant to see her cry and that, in such a state, it was completely impossible to make her laugh. Minya, at a loss, pondered her fate. She knew that if she failed to study in the palace, she would lose the chance to prevent Chen Huiming from becoming a tyrant. Yuxing, catching up with her, smiled and noted how well she'd hidden herself. He searched for a long time and finally found her jokingly chiding her for her cunning. Yuxing also noticed that she had clearly skipped lunch. It seemed to him that she had come here not for privacy but to catch frogs for food. Minya, still angry with her brother, was surprised to see Xingmu emerge from behind the trees. He handed her some food and offered to help her. However, the girl stubbornly pressed her lips together and replied that she wasn't hungry. Unfazed, Yuexing snatched the food from his brother and forcefully shoved it into his sister's mouth. Yuxing reminded her that no matter how heavy her heart, she should think about food. First, it would help her gain strength. Afterwards, the brothers took Minye's hand in theirs, telling her there would be a celebration in the shopping district that day. They suggested they go there and have some fun. Yuxing enthusiastically added that the celebration would definitely be more fun than catching frogs. He was sure the evening would bring them much joy. When they arrived, Minye was stunned. She hadn't expected such a lively atmosphere. There was genuine bustle and joy all around. She was surprised by what was happening. She thought it was an ordinary evening market, no different from the usual ones. She didn't see anything special about it. In contrast, Yuexing was beaming with happiness. He was eager to try the festive treats and participate in the games, so he immediately rushed to the stalls. Meanwhile, Xingmu and Min stopped to sample some cotton candy. While they were eating, the girl quietly addressed her brother. Minya sadly shared her conclusion. It seemed she truly had no chance of getting into the palace school. Her dreams were shattered. Xingmu gently asked her not to upset her father. He reminded her that after losing his sister to the power of the sacred beast, her father might not be able to bear further shocks. Minye nodded, understanding that her job was to conceal her abilities. She promised to never use the sacred beast's power or reveal her magic. Her father had told her sister Yun a long time ago that no one could guarantee that the power of the sacred beast would never be used even if it was absolutely necessary. He taught that even in the most desperate situations, one should not rely on magic. It is too great a responsibility to take on. Minya thoughtfully remarked that she didn't know what her future would be, but her only wish was for her beloved master to be happy. Xingmu tried to calm her down, adding that if she was persistent and calm, she would be able to prove that she was worthy of studying in the palace. Minye confidently declared that she could protect herself. She wanted to show her father that she wasn't afraid of responsibility and was able to control her powers. Xingmu thought for a moment and then asked how exactly she was going to prove her independence and strength to her father. Minye sighed, admitting she didn't have a plan yet. Her brother smiled and said he knew how to help her. Overjoyed, Ye asked him to share his method quickly. Her eyes lit up again with hope for her dream to come true. Xingmu explained that their father had a friend who was a master in the army. He wielded the power of the sacred beast at the highest level and could teach them a great deal. He suggested training in secret mastering powers so they could use them covertly. For example, learning to light a lantern without producing a visible flame. Minye was amazed how could she have forgotten that in the original children trained through magic and their powers were transformed through trials. She remembered that, in addition to transforming into sacred beasts, they could also control magical elements. She decided this method suited her. Minyi looked at her brother with gratitude. She considered him the best, most caring and attentive person in her life. Xingmu looked at his sister and thought. He remembered how his father had suffered because of his inability to protect his loved ones, and these memories haunted him. He felt useless blaming himself for failing to save his sister and spare his father's pain. This feeling haunted him. Minye, seeing his deep thought, firmly declared that she had already made her decision. She was ready to act and was not afraid of anything. Xingmu asked in surprise what exactly she had decided. Her confidence was alarming, but he knew she was more serious than ever. Minye calmly said that as soon as they returned home, she would talk to her father and prove to him that she was able to hide her powers and protect herself. Xingmu smiled, thinking that she was completely different from Sister Yun. Her determination and fortitude impressed him, and he was proud of her. Yerxin sat next to his friends and, noticing their stillness, asked them why they were sitting like that, as if the whole world had frozen. He then suggested they go somewhere fun, as he was terribly bored alone. Without waiting for an answer, he grabbed Minye's hand, intending to pull her along, but the girl immediately pleaded with him not to pull so harshly. She tried to protest softly, but Yue Sheng, smiling, still didn't let go. Reaching a busy area, they stopped at a stand selling masks. The girl spent a long time browsing the selection until she chose a fun one, especially for her older brother. When he put it on, the mask turned him into the funniest man they'd ever seen. His younger siblings couldn't help but laugh, loudly pointing their fingers at him. Then they were drawn to various amusements, fishing ring, tossing, and many other games. Eventually, they won a mountain of toys which delighted everyone. Minye proudly showed off her catch, claiming she had won the most. However, her brother, chuckling confidently, remarked that he had still won much more. The fun was suddenly interrupted when people began to be dispersed from the road. Someone important was obviously entering the street, and everyone immediately hurried to the side. Soon a gentleman appeared, seated in an elegant carriage. His spirits were clearly elevated, especially as he watched the crowd scatter in all directions like frightened mice. However, the carriage continued to move, heading straight for the girl. Yuesheng, noticing this, shouted loudly for Minye to be careful and immediately step aside. The girl only had time to turn around when her brother instantly grabbed her and threw her aside, saving her from danger. It all happened so quickly that she didn't even have time to process what had happened. Afterwards, Yuesheng ran up to her, anxiously asking if she was okay and why she was in the middle of the road. Minye, breathing heavily, also joined in, inquiring about his condition. However, their conversation was interrupted by a stern retort from the master. He contemptuously called them two stupid rats, noting that they had nearly harmed the heir to the throne. Minyi was stunned by these words. Her gaze fell on the figure of the fifth Prince Chen Yurui, who stood before them like the embodiment of thunder and majesty. In the manhwa, he bullied the main character Huiming, which influenced this guy's character, and she didn't expect to meet him here. The prince asked why they did not let the heir to the throne's carriage pass. Were they blind, or did they deliberately want to harm him? Minye shouted at him that there were a lot of people at the festival, and he was galloping along. He had no conscience at all. He started screaming that she was a stinking mouse from the slums and thought she could have him. It looked like she wanted to taste his window. That one it should kneel before the heir to the throne. She would so like to finish off this bastard, but she can't use her Fire Phoenix power. She will be discovered immediately and it will all be over. After a heated argument, the boy declared that he now considered himself her brother and would not allow anyone to hurt her. He sternly ordered everyone to shut up and leave his sister alone. The prince, surprised by this statement, asked if he really was the same Yuesheng, since as far as he knew his sister had disappeared. He looked at him with disbelief. Even more perplexed, he asked where the other sister could have come from. The boy waved him off, saying he was simply too lazy to explain everything to him and had no intention of doing so. After this, the guy suggested to Chen Yuerui that they settle the matter man to man, one-on-one, declaring that his sister had nothing to do with it. The prince agreed, eagerly awaiting the outcome of the confrontation. He wanted to see who would prove stronger and what this daring young man was capable of. However, one of the servants intervened, reminding him that Chen Yuerui was one of the heirs to the throne, and no one dared to raise a hand against him as this was unacceptable. Yuesheng was shocked by this ban. His indignation hadn't even had time to subside before it hit him in the face. This was an unexpected turn of events. Chen Yuerui rejoiced, confident that the blow had hit its mark. He proclaimed that this strike had secured victory, which only further incited further indignation. The boy disagreed with his words, calling him a coward and declaring that only a fair victory mattered. His indignation reached its peak and he wished death on his enemy. King Mu intervened, grabbing his brother's arm. He demanded that he come over and stop his harsh words towards Chen Yuerui. Yuesheng tried to justify himself by pointing out his opponent's arrogant behavior. He also pointed out that he had dared to insult Min Yi, which particularly angered him. Xingmu, trying to calm his brother down, assured him that he would take care of it himself, and there was no point in worrying about it. He then approached the fifth prince with an apology for the disrespectful behavior of his brother and sister, asking for his permission to compensate for the inconvenience caused. Chen Yuerui felt relieved to finally see a reasonable person standing before him. He noted that the siblings had nearly knocked him off his feet. Xingmu expressed deep regret and promised to tell his father about it. He assured the siblings that they would be punished for their behavior. Chen Yuerui, pleased with this promise, demanded that the brother and sister henceforth know their place, behave more carefully, and not interfere with the future emperor. Xingmu agreed and hurried away with his companions. His calm demeanor did not escape the notice of Yuesheng, who was struck by his restraint. Yuesheng couldn't understand why his brother treated this man so politely, even though his behavior deserved a completely different response. But soon, Xingmu, smiling, explained that no one would dare humiliate his family with impunity. The enemy would suffer such humiliation that they would be unable to recover. Minyi realized then that her older brother was a true strategic genius. His plans were always thought out down to the smallest detail. Yu Sheng, infected with brotherly confidence, decided to find out what exactly Xingmu was planning in order to evaluate his brilliant strategy. The prince stopped at a spot that immediately caught his eye with its beauty and comfort. He decided it was perfect for him and ordered his guards to remove the boy, sitting there believing the place belonged solely to him. The boy's father, seeing what was happening, approached the prince and angrily said that he must be out of his mind to try to drive them away. After all, they were here first and had no intention of giving in. The prince's servant, noticing the outrage, rudely asked the man what he was doing. He declared that he had no right to speak to their master like that and demanded respect. After this, the man and the boy quickly left the scene, not wanting to get involved in a conflict. The prince, as if nothing had happened, ordered the cotton candy seller to quickly make him a sweet monkey figurine. The vendor immediately set to work creating the desired sweet for the prince. At this moment, Dingmu approached one of the guards from behind, intending to strike up a conversation. While Xingmu distracted the guard, Yue Sheng addressed Chen Yuerui. Trying to divert his attention, Min Yi, meanwhile, hid behind the wall, plotting her next move. Xingmu continued to speak to the guard, preventing him from noticing what was happening. Meanwhile, Yue Sheng increased the distraction, so the prince wouldn't suspect anything. Minye deftly approached the prince's cotton candy and discreetly added some powder to it. Then, taking advantage of the opportunity, she also smeared some sticky substance on his chair. Having completed her actions, Minye looked around and signaled to her brothers that everything was ready. They understood without words and continued their plan. Yu Bixin, seeing the prince's reaction, declared that he would no longer speak to him. This was all part of their cunning plan. Fingmu also apologized, saying that he had to leave, and hurried to join his comrades, leaving the prince perplexed. Chen Yurui, unsuspecting, sat down on his chair and began eating his food. He simultaneously checked with the vendor to make sure his sugar monkey was ready. The seller replied that it would take a little more time to complete the work, as the figurine required precision and care. While the prince was enjoying his meal, the vendor finished creating the sugar monkey. The prince reached out to take it, but suddenly felt a severe pain in his stomach. Chen Yurui's expression changed abruptly, barely managing to contain the discomfort. He realized that something had clearly gone wrong. His servant, concerned about his master's condition, immediately asked what had happened. The prince explained with difficulty that he had suddenly developed a severe stomach ache. Chen Yurui immediately ordered the guards to take him to the restroom. The pain was so intense he could barely bear it and demanded immediate action. When he tried to get up, he found himself stuck in the chair, glued tightly, which only increased his anger. The guard assured him that he would help immediately, but the prince shouted impatiently, demanding that they act faster as he could no longer bear the pain. The man was at a loss, as the fabric of his clothes was stuck tightly to the chair. The prince demanded an immediate solution, threatening him with punishment. The guard suggested removing his pants and the chair to somehow free the prince. It was the best solution he could come up with at the time. However, this enraged the prince. He believed the guard was trying to make fun of him by forcing him to walk around the market without pants, and he threatened to kill him. The guard immediately began apologizing, trying to calm the gentleman. But Chen Yurui was getting worse, and he ordered him to be taken immediately to a place where there were no people. The guard lifted the prince onto his shoulder and began to push his way through the crowd, loudly dispersing people in order to quickly get him to a secluded place. However, a watermelon was suddenly thrown at his feet, causing him to trip and fall along with the prince, causing a loud noise and laughter all around. The enraged prince called the guard a dog and promised to punish him for such clumsiness. His anger seemed boundless. The prince screamed, begging for help as his stomach pain grew more and more intense. He demanded an immediate solution to the situation. The guard again begged the gentleman to take off his pants, otherwise things would get even worse. He knew there was no more time to think. Chen Yurui, realizing that he had no way out, ordered the guard to take off his pants and give them to him in order to somehow hide his humiliation. The prince, having donned his guard's trousers, hurried away. The spectacle was so comical that the brothers and Min Ye couldn't help but burst into laughter. Their laughter echoed throughout the market. They were certain Chen Yurui had gotten what he deserved. He would remember this humiliation for a long time. The three continued to have fun ridiculing the prince and calling him a shit-eater. Yue Sheng reminded them that he had warned them. This humiliation would be hard to forget. They hadn't returned yet, and Chu Pei began to wonder if he'd been too harsh with Min Yi that morning. This worry tormented him, giving him no peace. He anxiously hoped that his stern words had prevented the girl from leaving the house. The guilt over their morning conversation now haunted him. At this point, a servant announced that the lady and the prince had gone to the festival and were most likely already returning home. Chu Pei tried to calm down. He tried to believe the servant, but a few minutes later he personally saw them returning home, and a slight smile of relief appeared on his face. It was nice to see his sons getting along with Min Ye. It filled Chu Pei with warmth as their unity was important to him. It had been a long time since he'd seen Xingmu and Yue Xing so happy. Their joy seemed contagious, awakening a long-forgotten sense of peace within him. Xingmu happily announced that they had returned. His voice was full of enthusiasm, as if he had truly enjoyed the day. Minya approached her father with a gentle smile, handing him the mask and explaining that it was her gift to him. It was a touching moment. The father, not expecting a gift, thanked the girl with a kind smile. Her gesture sincerely touched his heart. Minya then expressed her desire to talk to her father, and he, of course, agreed. Surprised by her serious mood, Yuxi noted that they could talk, but she wanted to hear his opinion too. This prompted them to discuss things more thoroughly. Xingmu tugged at him, saying it wasn't her decision and that he shouldn't be so insistent. They were about to leave, but the younger brother protested, saying he was curious. Minye said that although she possessed the power of sacred beasts, her abilities were different from those of his friend's daughter. This emphasized that she had her own unique purpose. The girl strove to develop the power of the holy beast and become strong so as to no longer experience tragedies. She understood the importance of self-defense in this world. Chu Pei asked if she truly wanted to cultivate the power of the sacred beast. He was surprised by her determination and wanted to be sure of her seriousness. The girl confirmed her intention and added that she knew of a friend of her father's who was also cultivating the power of a holy beast. This was important for her to understand what was possible. He asked in surprise how she knew about this, but the girl corrected herself, saying it wasn't her brother, and soon admitted she'd been mistaken. She quickly corrected herself. Her father was a little indignant, knowing who might have told her about it. He began to suspect that someone was deliberately pushing her to ask such questions. When his father recalled this, Xingmu's nose began to itch, and he couldn't understand why he felt a certain awkwardness but couldn't explain it. Minyi said she didn't want to pressure her father, but she needed to convince him she could protect herself. She was determined to prove her independence. Her father stroked her head and told her that she was his daughter and that he believed in her. He knew she was strong, and this was an important confirmation of her abilities. Tomorrow, they would be able to visit his friend, and the girl was overjoyed. This was a true gift for her, as she had long wanted to learn more about the power of the holy beast. She hugged Chu Pei, expressing gratitude and joy. She was very happy and said she was lucky to have such a caring father. Her father hugged her too, realizing he might have been mistaken. She wasn't Yun, not her replacement, and he was beginning to realize she was unique. The next day, they went to his friend to ask for help. It was an important moment, and they were preparing for the long-awaited visit. Nady reported that they had arrived, and the girl remarked that at first glance, one could tell that an extraordinary person, very wise and mysterious, lived here. They knocked on the door, and the hermit Shu Changan opened it. His appearance immediately made it clear that he was a man who hid much from the world. Yu, seeing the guests, asked who they were. When he realized it was his old acquaintance, he became a little alarmed and stepped aside, clearly not expecting the visit. He asked them to leave and started to close the door, but it was clear he didn't want to receive guests. There was a note of anxiety in his voice, as if he didn't want to talk. Chu Pei noticed that before he could even say anything, Shu had already decided to close the door. He reminded his friend that they were best friends and didn't deserve such treatment. Zhu said something must have happened, as Chu Pei only came in emergencies when he needed help. This confirmed his concerns. Chu Pei assured him he only had a small favor to ask. He hadn't expected his friend to be so wary, but he knew he needed help. The girl was simply delighted when she saw this gentleman. He asked her if she was Chu Pei's daughter. She proudly replied that she was. The girl introduced herself as Chen Min, Ye Chu Pei's daughter. She was proud of her family and happily explained that her father was Chu Pei, well known in many circles. Shu was embarrassed to see her and was a little taken aback by her words. This was an unexpected encounter for him, and he felt awkward, unsure how to react. Chu Pei noted, with a smile, that she was truly very sweet and that it all came from her father. He was proud of his daughter and didn't hide his delight at her character. Yu said he was only agreeing to help because of her presence, as she had made an impression on him. He opened the doors and invited them in. Chu Pei smiled and remarked that she was a great girl, as Shu wasn't usually so accommodating. Minyi was shocked by how she'd managed to persuade him. Chu Pei told Cheng'en to teach his daughter how to use the power of the sacred beast. The man was shocked that he had the nerve to say goodbye like that. After all, he knew that in order to master the power of the sacred beast, one had to use extremely cruel techniques. Chu Pei said he knew, but only by mastering the power of the sacred beast could his daughter protect herself. Minye also said she knew this, so she wasn't afraid. The gentleman admitted that he himself was afraid because 10 years ago an incident occurred that left a deep mark on his soul, continuing to influence his life. The man was puzzled as to why it hadn't worked again, since this was already the 7th person, and he couldn't understand the reason for this latest failure despite all his efforts. The emperors were on the verge of rage, and if they failed again, no one would be able to prevent their wrath, and the consequences would be dire for them. He insisted that the remaining experiments must be carried out immediately, and that Changjin must begin carrying out this task without delay. But Chang'an turned around sharply, slapping the man across the face, showing his determination and steadfastness in his actions despite the protest and indignation. The man was stunned and believed that this man had gone crazy. Perhaps he had decided to rebel against everyone without understanding his actions and reasons. Chang'an explained that this was not an experiment, but real people, that there were no numbers, only real life, and that this was not a hair game but a brutal murder. He warned the man to stop talking nonsense, as his words clearly showed that he did not value his life if he continued to behave like that. Chang'an said that if he was destined to die, he would accept it, but he was no longer prepared to continue participating in these endless experiments. He was able to stay alive after leaving the army only thanks to Chu Pei, who saved him, and now he is ready to help him despite his crazy requests. Despite the madness of Chu Pei's requests, Chang'an was ready to sacrifice his life to save him and had no intention of backing down from his obligations. He asked the gentleman to return home because he understood that he would not be able to fulfill his request, considering it too difficult and dangerous. Minye asked the gentleman to help her, stating that this was her personal wish, and she hoped that he would not refuse. The gentleman was embarrassed by her request, but she confidently said that no matter who approached him with this, the answer would always be the same. The girl said that even if he didn't agree today, she would come back tomorrow to make him change his mind, leaving no chance for refusal. But Chu Pei intervened, saying that they could not leave, and stopped her, leaving a clear warning that they would not leave this place without consent. He stated that until the gentleman agreed, they would remain here without leaving this area and would wait for his decision until the last minute. Shupei was sure that he would stay here until the master changed his mind and agreed to their request no matter what. Changjin indignantly said that he had neither shame nor conscience, since his actions simply could not be justified in this situation. However, the place was secluded, so Changjin decided to send someone to build some houses for them, where they could live, together with Xingmu and Yuesheng. There were many bamboo forests around, and Changjin decided that they would cut them all down to use the wood to build the necessary houses for their settlement. He stated that this was enough and seemed to act as if he was deliberately trying to drive them crazy with his actions and decisions. He added that Chupei only brings misfortune, and this will be obvious to everyone, but now they can stay and return home as they planned. Minye, unable to believe, it asked if the master was really willing to teach her, hoping for his help and support in her endeavors. The man said that the preparation process would be excruciating and painful, and she should be mentally prepared for the difficult trials that would begin in the morning. The girl was happy because her father said that if she could not bear the pain, they would return home, but he was already proud of her for her courage and determination. Minye, of course, agreed and promised to tell him that she would definitely pass this test and not let him down in the future. The next morning, the man told her that she should sit in the lotus position and concentrate her 5 hearts, pointing them towards the sky to begin the practice. These 5 heavenly hearts symbolize the connection with heaven and earth, and activating them is a pose that helps draw life force from the world around us. He also said that she should swallow a pill, after which her body would completely relax and she would enter a state suitable for the next stage. When she swallows the pill, her body will relax and she will go into a trance, allowing him to work on her acupuncture points for healing. This process was extremely painful, and many children who possessed the power of sacred beasts could not even endure the first trial, dying from blood loss. He reminded them that it was too late to back out now, as he had seen Chupei lose his daughter and did not want it to happen again, which had encouraged them yesterday. He said that if she took the medicine, the consequences could be extremely severe, and she was even risking her life that her death was now possible. But the girl did not agree with this, declaring that she would always be a daddy's girl, which was destined by fate, and after that she decisively swallowed the pill. The gentleman sighed, seeing her determination, and said that in that case they could begin the procedure right now without delaying it for a minute. He began the ritual while the girl was in a deep trance, a critical moment for her physical and spiritual transformation. The girl had already begun to feel how warm energy filled her body, creating a feeling of deep calm and peace like never before. She felt her body being filled with pure energy that flowed freely, bringing her an amazing feeling of lightness and harmony. The energy spread throughout her body and gathered in one point, and she felt that this was the power of the sacred beast that was awakening within her. Minya felt her body being renewed and filled with strength. She felt completely new and full of energy, ready for any challenge. The gentleman was stunned to see a smile on her face that he did not expect to see, especially in such a difficult and painful process. Changjin noted that he did not expect this and added that this was the first time he saw that she was not in pain, but on the contrary, felt great. When the girl opened her eyes, the gentleman said that they could now continue the test and try to evaluate the result of her preparation. The girl realized that this must be the power of a sacred beast. The master said that her body doesn't repel the power of a sacred beast. This is extremely rare and her abilities are truly unique. Minye was overjoyed and asked if this meant she was cool. Well, this was just the beginning. In the coming days, she would continue to develop her strength and prepare for it. The body of the sacred beast is not only to light the lantern from a distance, but also to constantly develop your skills in wielding it. Minye couldn't wait for the training to start, and a month later, the girl stood with her father, wanting him to watch carefully. Using her magical abilities, the girl managed to light the lanterns, but for some reason only 2. She was surprised, but decided to keep trying, knowing her magic had to be stronger. A little later, she managed to light 5 of the 6 lanterns. She wondered if she lit them all, her father would start to worry, since her true abilities were supposed to remain a secret. To hide her true power, she feigned difficulty and tried to slow the process down. She understood that her magic might raise questions best left unanswered. The girl insisted she couldn't do anything. Even when the situation didn't change, she stubbornly maintained the illusion of her weakness. She was sorry that the last lantern remained unlit. She did this deliberately to finally convince everyone of her clumsiness. Xu Pei praised her, noting that she had made significant progress in a month. Her progress was obvious, and this pleased him as a teacher. He announced that it was time to go home. The girl didn't object, as she too was homesick, and she happily agreed. Xu Pei sincerely thanked Changjin for his help, but he brushed it off, saying that gratitude was unnecessary and that he was simply doing his duty. Changjin even added that there was no point in coming back and that next time he might not open the door, but his words were spoken with a hint of irony. However, Changjin noted that he would always be happy to see his daughter. This was said with sincerity, demonstrating his affection for the girl. Minya promised that she would definitely visit the teacher in the future because she felt deep respect and gratitude towards him. After saying goodbye to Chengen, Minya headed home with her father, feeling that new adventures awaited her. She told her father that now that she could hide her power, she should pay attention to the palace where important tasks awaited her. Her father agreed with her decision, noting that this was the right time to channel her abilities in the right direction. Minya was overjoyed, for she would soon meet Chen Huiming. She was determined to change his fate and prevent him from becoming a tyrant. At the Lenggong Palace, Chen Yuerui decided to visit his 6th brother. He brought along a ton of firecrackers to amuse himself. Yuerui invited his brother to play, and then, without waiting for his consent, began throwing firecrackers at him, embarrassing and irritating him. He hurled another firecracker straight at his brother, who by this point was barely recognizable. He was covered in bruises and battered. The 5th prince, laughing, literally showered him with firecrackers, giving him no time to catch his breath. Yorui, watching this chaos, couldn't stand by. She wanted to play with her brothers and had no desire to see the 6th prince try to escape all these attacks. After another blow, the 6th brother lost his balance and fell to the floor with a dull thud. Still laughing, the 5th prince continued throwing firecrackers at him, ignoring his attempts to defend himself. Yuerui, seeing that the game had gone too far, asked the 6th prince why he was hiding. She thought it was unfair as they hadn't had time to play properly yet. However, the 5th prince again persistently distracted, the 6th demanding his attention. The 6th prince was already beginning to tire of constantly trying to avoid new games. The 6th prince was forced to constantly defend himself from his brother's endless attacks. It seemed the chaos would never end, as the 5th prince showed no sign of giving in. When he threw another firecracker, it hit its target, causing his brother to stop. Shocked by the sudden impact, the 6th prince didn't immediately realize what had happened. The guards monitoring the scene noticed the 6th prince's hair catching fire. They immediately raised the alarm to stop the fire and avoid serious consequences. The fire was quickly extinguished, but the 6th prince complained of pain from the burns. His face expressed a mixture of anger and resentment, further inflaming the situation. The 5th prince, despite the gravity of the situation, merely laughed at him. This mocking behavior only inflamed the 6th prince even more, and he could no longer contain his emotions. The 6th prince believed his younger brother had overstepped his bounds. He ordered the guards to immediately detain the culprit to put an end to this outrage. Despite the tense situation, the 5th prince insisted it was just a game. He promised that next time they would have even more fun. He ended up laughing even louder, but this only increased the anger of his brother. who was clearly in no mood to share his younger brother's joy. The palace where Huiming lived was renowned for its beauty. Its graceful architecture and lush gardens made it a special place, but behind its walls lay numerous dramas. Life in the Lengong Palace was fraught with hardship. Despite his outward appearance of well-being, Huiming often suffered, causing concern among those dear to him. His sister turned to their father, trying to find out how they would spend the day. Her question was driven less by curiosity than by inner turmoil. Today, a celebration was held at the palace, bringing together all members of the royal family. They came to congratulate the emperor and his wife on this special occasion. This day was special, and the girl remembered how in the manhua, Huiming was poisoned at exactly this time. This thought made her nervous. The secret behind this poisoning was the evil deed of concubine Jin, the mother of the fifth prince Yuerui. Her treacherous act was the beginning of many misfortunes. Huiming didn't die, but the poison left an indelible mark on his body. The constant torment of the toxin altered his character, transforming him into a completely different person. This event became a key moment that laid the foundation for his future transformation into a tyrant capable of cruel acts. However, the girl understood that she had to prevent tragedy. Her determination to save Huiming grew stronger. Chu Pei, understanding the responsibility, warned that there would be many guests in the palace today, and Min Ye was here for the first time, so the brothers had to keep an eye on her. Xingmu agreed to fulfill the request, but Yue Shen pointed out that she had nothing to worry about, as he would keep a close eye on her. However, Chu Pai noticed that the girl had suddenly disappeared. She had been standing next to him just a moment ago, but now she had vanished, which greatly alarmed him. He had a hard time dealing with this restless child. Despite all his sternness, he felt the situation was spiraling out of control. His eldest son reassured him, suggesting that they immediately begin searching for the missing girl. His confidence eased Chu Pei's anxiety somewhat. Yue Sheng insisted on joining the search. He expressed his willingness to help his brother and find her as quickly as possible. The courtyard of Gihua Palace was filled with silence and luxury. A majestic lady, clad in rich robes and radiating a commanding presence, stood tall on one of the pavilions. Another woman stood next to her, and several princes were present. The empress, creating a calm atmosphere, ordered sweet soup to be served to them as a sign of respect. It was this courtyard, once beautiful, that became the site of the tragedy where Huiming was poisoned. His memory still lingered here, filling the air with tension. Guards were posted at the entrance to Gihua Palace, keeping a close eye on everything that happened. It was difficult for the stranger to figure out how to sneak in unnoticed. Looking around, she spotted a spreading tree nearby. Looking up, the woman devised a plan. With its help, she could sneak into the desired location unnoticed. Meanwhile, the mistress took special care to persuade the sixth prince to drink the sweet soup. She had prepared it especially for him with hidden intentions. Minnie, observing all this, settled comfortably on a tree branch. She followed the events closely, holding her breath. According to the original story, it was this sweet soup that proved fatal for Huiming. His poisoning was part of a plot rife with hidden threats. It was time to use the sacred beast's power. Minya realized she could heat objects from a distance using this mystical ability. The maid, holding a bowl of soup, suddenly felt a burning sensation in her hands. She dropped the dish and it shattered on the floor with a loud thud. The mistress lost her temper and shouted furiously at the maid, calling her incompetent. Her voice was full of contempt, as if the maid's life no longer mattered. The frightened maid immediately fell to her knees and began begging for forgiveness. She explained that the soup had suddenly become too hot and she had been unable to hold the bowl. However, the lady treated her words with disbelief. She couldn't understand how a simple sweet soup could become so hot. Her suspicions grew stronger. The maid continued to swear her honesty. She assured her mistress that she wouldn't dare lie, but her desperation only fueled suspicion. The Empress, intervening, turned to concubine Jin. She pointed out that today's celebration shouldn't be ruined by a broken plate, as the soup could be served again. The woman, understanding the importance of the Empress's words, immediately apologized. She admitted that she had indeed overreacted and promised to be more restrained in the future. Minye watched this with relief. Her plan had succeeded. No one suspected her involvement, and the sacred beast's power had once again proven extremely useful. However, a boy standing in the crowd noticed Min. Yet his gaze was full of curiosity. He wanted to understand who she was and what she was doing in the tree. Minya tried to use gestures to explain to him that the soup was poisoned. She warned him not to drink it, but the boy didn't immediately understand her hint. Her desperate attempts to convey the meaning were futile. The boy remained confused. His lack of understanding made it difficult for her to proceed. Suddenly, the branch beneath Minye cracked and she began to fall. This attracted the attention of the guards, who immediately rushed to the scene. However, when the guards ran to the tree, they found no one there. This only increased their confusion. It was unclear who could be there or what had happened. Chen Huiming wondered what the girl was doing. It seemed like she wanted to tell him something. After this, the fifth prince approached him and called him to him. Huiming asked what was wrong. The boy said he hadn't gotten any sweet soup, and out of the kindness of his heart, he'd saved him a bowl so he could have some. The guy also said that he added a bowl of black sugar. It's very tasty. He can try it. Huiming said that this was too much. The prince asked what he was talking about, because he was with all his soul, and therefore he did not understand why his younger brother was shouting. He didn't understand why the guards were standing there like they were stuck in a daze. They had to grab him because this guy had to eat the whole plate. He suddenly broke into a run, disappearing swiftly into the palace's labyrinth. The guards, armed and wary, gave chase, but his agility and speed gave him the advantage. Chen Yuerui, seeing the guards lagging behind, loudly ordered them to speed up. His voice was full of determination. The fugitive could not be allowed to get lost in the crowded part of the palace. Finding herself in the enormous palace, Minya looked around in confusion. Its size and complexity left her bewildered. She didn't know where to go or how to find the right place. She collided with Huiming completely by accident. The impact was unexpected and both fell to the ground, not yet realizing who was standing in front of them. The boy recognized Minyi as the one who had just been hiding in the tree, and she in turn realized that in front of her was the same Huiming she had heard about earlier. Chen Yurui, finally catching up with them, triumphantly announced that Minye was Yuexing's sister, making her an ally. He considered this an excellent arrangement. Wasting no time, he ordered the sixth prince's immediate capture. The guards immediately complied, seizing the boy despite his resistance. Huiming screamed, furiously demanding that he be released and his hands removed. However, Chen Yurui remained indifferent to his protests, merely smirking. The fifth prince, turning to his brother, asked him sarcastically where he was rushing off to. He reminded him that he hadn't yet tried the sweet soup, which he would be sorry to throw away. Huiming, despite the ridicule, refused to give in. He was irritated that his brother dared to force him to eat, especially without any explanation. Minyi knew that the soup contained a cockroach, and she was only angry at the fifth prince, considering him a persistent, cunning, and vile person, ready to commit vile acts. Chen Yuerui, ignoring Huiming's displeasure, declared that he should eat the soup immediately, as it was an order that could not be ignored. Minyi then decided to intervene. She curiously inquired whether the soup was really as delicious as they said and expressed a desire to try it. The fifth prince looked at her with distrust, pushed the soup away, and rudely ordered her to leave so as not to irritate him with her presence. But Min Ye continued to insist, urging him to share at least a little. She chided the prince for his greed, which only angered him. In the midst of their argument, he abruptly pushed her away, causing some of the soup to spill, At that point, the situation became even more tense. Then he slipped, and the remains of the soup ended up on his clothes, staining them. The whole thing looked ridiculous and caused laughter among those around him. The guards immediately ran to the fifth prince, trying to calm him down. However, his mood clearly worsened even more. Taking advantage of the moment, Minyi whispered to the sixth prince that now was the time to escape, while attention was diverted to what had happened. To further divert attention, she added that a cockroach was hiding in the fifth prince's clothes, causing quite a stir. The prince screamed, demanding that his guards immediately remove the insect. Panic gripped everyone around him, causing even greater chaos. The servant suggested undressing the prince so he could thoroughly inspect his clothes. This idea provoked fury and indignation in the fifth prince. He began insulting the servant and even kicking him, believing he was embarrassing him in front of everyone. The prince's anger was uncontrollable. The guard tried to smooth things over by suggesting they return to the palace to avoid further scandal, which had already attracted attention. Minya, pleased with the result, quietly released the cockroach from her hand. She smiled, realizing her plan had succeeded. Meanwhile, the brothers approached her, and Minyi felt a mixture of fear and excitement. She hadn't expected to see them here. Yu Xing calmly reminded her that the palace was a place where order had to be maintained, and asked her not to make such scenes again. The girl regretfully admitted her guilt and sincerely apologized for the trouble she had caused, lowering her head before her older brother. Xinmu, smiling slightly, remarked that she'd had her fill of playing and it was time to return. He was clearly pleased by her remorse. Minye enthusiastically recounted how she had used her abilities for the first time and succeeded. She was proud of herself. Xinmu praised her, but reminded her that their father was waiting for them and it was time to go, so as not to keep him waiting for long. Haiming suddenly stopped. He realized he couldn't leave Minye alone and decided to go back to make sure she was okay. However, he noticed her leaving with her brothers. This reassured him and he decided that she was no longer in any danger, but he still didn't understand why she had helped him. Meanwhile, Minye had already met with her father and announced her return. She apologized for using the sacred beast's power, emphasizing that no one had noticed. She was worried about worrying her father, but her father assured her there was no reason to apologize. He believed in her and knew she had acted with good intentions. Minye was surprised by his reaction. She expected punishment or at least rebuke, but he merely expressed his support. The father also said that one of the reasons for their visit was to prepare for school. The girl was scheduled to start school in 3 days. This news delighted Min. Yes, she was excited, having long dreamed of studying, but Yue Xing was in complete shock. His shock was so strong that he began to complain to his father that this news gave him a headache. Guihua Palace. The maid simply begged her mistress to forgive her, but the concubine was furious and shouted that the maid was simply useless, since she couldn't even serve a bowl of soup. The concubine, overcome with rage, screamed loudly that the servant was completely useless. Her anger manifested itself not only in words, but also in the cruel ridicule she heaped upon the unfortunate woman. The maid, trembling with fear, fell to her knees, begging the concubine for mercy. However, her tears and pleas were met with cold indifference. The concubine remained adamant. Li Anhai. The eunuch came closer and said in a restrained tone that even if the concubine were to break the maid's arm now, it would not change anything and would not bring the problem any closer to solving. The concubine understood the eunuch's words as a veiled request for mercy toward the servant, but her gaze only flashed with disdain. She had no intention of listening to advice. The eunuch reminded her that if the truth about the sixth prince's poisoning came to light, the consequences would be dire for everyone. He tried to persuade his mistress to act wisely. Li Anhai suggested that the concubine keep her hands clean and let him handle the situation himself. He assured her that he would take care of everything and she could focus on her own affairs. The maid cried out in despair that she wouldn't tell anyone anything just so long as they spared her. However, the concubine mercilessly pushed her away without even looking her in the eye. Looking at the eunuch with disdain, the concubine ordered him to leave, claiming that the place was too dirty for her presence, and continued to mockingly examine the room. The eunuch reassured his mistress, promising that everything would be settled, although the maid without ceasing continued to beg for mercy, clinging to her last chance. Lian Hai stuffed a piece of paper into the maid's mouth to silence her pleas. Then the guards grabbed her and led her away, ignoring her resistance. The concubine calmly ordered that the sixth prince be eliminated as soon as possible, emphasizing that they must not make such mistakes again. 3 days later, at Taishu school, Yue Sheng again complained that every time he sat down to read, he began to suffer from a severe headache, which made it difficult for him to concentrate. Minye noticed Huiming's absence, and it confused her. She wondered why she couldn't see the sixth prince in class, especially since the school year had only just begun. Concerned, she approached the teacher and asked if he knew the reason for Prince Huiming's absence, as it seemed completely strange and untimely to her. The teacher honestly replied that he knew nothing about it. His words only increased Minya's anxiety as she began recalling details from the original story. She recalled that in the original work, Huiming was imprisoned in Lengui and no one cared about his fate. No one cared about his studies back then either. Chen Yurui expressed bewilderment at how someone like Huiming had even managed to get to Taishui. In his eyes, it was utterly absurd, and the prince himself was useless. It was said in the discussion that despite his title, Huiming was nothing more than a miserable, motherless degenerate. The fifth prince made no secret of his contempt for him. Min Ye considered the fifth prince a complete scumbag. In her opinion, if it weren't for him and concubine, Jin Huiming's childhood wouldn't have been as tragic as it was. Huiming couldn't understand why Min Ye was staring at him. Her attention irritated him, especially when she suddenly started asking strange questions. The teacher sternly reminded them that class was in session and they weren't allowed to leave the classroom. However, Minye still left, ignoring his words much to everyone's surprise. One of the students asked about the girl who had so brazenly broken the rules. He was told that her name was Chen Min Ye, and that she had recently become the adopted daughter of Prince Chu Pei. The fifth prince sneered that she was nothing more than a simpleton without a mother. He expressed disdain for her lineage, which infuriated Yue Sheng. Yue Sheng, without restraining his emotions, asked the prince how he dared speak of his sister like that. The prince, unable to understand the source of his anger, suggested that Yue Sheng immediately begin a fight. Meanwhile, Minye approached the director and greeted him politely, drawing attention to herself with manners that were atypical for her young age. The director, recognizing Minye, noted that she was the adopted daughter of Prince Chu Pei. This added to her importance, but he was wary of her approach to the question, which was inappropriate for her age. Minye asked why sixth Prince Huiming wasn't at school. Considering that classes had begun and it was his responsibility, she expressed genuine concern. The director explained that documents were required for admission, and no one had provided them. Moreover, concubine Jin had already ordered the prince to remain in Lengyi. Minye objected, declaring that even if no one had taken care of the prince's admission, he still had the right to study. She asked the principal to correct this oversight. The emperor, hearing her words, was surprised. He hadn't expected such a young girl to dare to say such things, especially since it wasn't her duty. The emperor felt that Minye was taking on too much, considering she was merely the prince's adopted daughter. Her background was rural and school was a great privilege. He thought her insolence sounded like a reproach to the imperial family. If even the family itself couldn't resolve this issue, what could a village girl do? Minye loudly and confidently protested that she was Mr. Chu Pei's daughter, not a village girl. Her words were so decisive that everyone froze in amazement. The emperor was shocked by her self-confidence. She truly considered herself the equal of the nobles, and this left him with a mixture of surprise and irritation. He was about to give her a sarcastic retort, but at that moment a man entered the room whose presence made everyone hold their breath. Minye recognized him immediately. It was her father, Prince Chu-Pei, who addressed the director decisively. The director immediately sensed the tension and bowed fearfully before the distinguished guest. Chu-Pei demanded imperiously who the director thought he was to dare treat his daughter like that. His voice boomed, heightening the fear of those around him. The director, speechless, tried to justify himself, but his words were garbled. He trembled, realizing that his life could depend on every word he spoke. Minya felt relieved by her father's presence. Her fear and anxiety began to subside, and she looked at him gratefully, feeling his support. Chu-Pei explained that he had come to check on his daughter, as it was her first day of school. His concern for her was understandable, but he hadn't expected to be met with such an insult. The prince expressed bewilderment at how the director could behave so brazenly. It was a clear challenge to his authority and a threat to family honor, which was unacceptable. The director, trembling, tried to explain, but the prince firmly declared that from the moment Minye was adopted, her previous origin no longer mattered. Now she is a princess and a royal relative. Chu-Pei warned the director, any disrespect towards her would be considered an insult to the entire family. For this, he reminded there was a severe penalty. Contempt for the royal family was unforgivable, and he asked the director if he understood the full gravity of his offense. Minye, without waiting for a response, loudly declared that such a crime was punishable by death. Her words sounded firm despite her young age. The director fell to his knees, begging for mercy. He assured the prince that he would never allow such a thing to happen again and was prepared to follow all his instructions. Chu-Pei put away his sword and warned the director that this was his last chance. If he wanted to save his life, he must be extremely careful in the future. Minya took advantage of the opportunity to tell her father that the director had refused to take up the matter of admitting the sixth prince despite his status. She added that ignoring the sixth prince, who even lived in Lengui, was an insult to the royal family. The director remained indifferent. Chu-Pei turned to the director and asked if this was really the case. Panicked, he declared it was a misunderstanding and promised to personally resolve the situation. Minye replied that there was no need to bother him and expressed her willingness to go to Langong Palace herself to take care of the sixth prince. The director attempted to object, pointing out that her proposal was inappropriate, but he spoke with extreme caution, fearing to anger the prince. Chu-Pei calmly but firmly objected that his family considered this entirely appropriate and asked the director directly if he had any objections. The director, realizing it was pointless to argue quickly, assured her he had no objections. He handed Min Yi the documents necessary for the sixth prince's admission. Min Ye was delighted that everything had been resolved so easily. She informed her father that she would now go to the palace and find the prince to help him enroll in school. Her father gave her his pass and asked her to be careful. His concern touched Min Yi, but she confidently assured him that everything would be fine. After saying goodbye, Min Yi went to the sixth prince with firm determination, convinced that she would definitely cope with this task. Min Yi was surprised. The palace complex is very large, so she does not know which of these buildings is the Langong Palace where Huiming lives. She noticed Li Anming, who is the godson of the Grand Eunuch Li Anhai. His lackey who does his dirty work for him, he continued to bully Huiming. This man, striking with his clumsiness and defiant behavior, ended up here. It's no surprise. They're probably looking for Huiming, given the constant problems swirling around him. Outside, the noise was unimaginable. The first day of school always brings bustle and hubbub, but this had nothing to do with the prince's case, only adding to the sense of alienation. Huiming pondered the mysterious girl. Her appearance would be a miracle, but infiltrating the palace was difficult. Every corner here was under surveillance, especially from vile individuals like his pursuers. But all his thoughts were secondary to the excruciating hunger. He sat like a wilting flower with a sad expression on his face, struggling to find even a little energy. Li Enming suddenly burst in, his eyes glittering and his voice harsh. He enthusiastically declared that he had been looking for him, as if delighted at his good fortune in finding the prince at just the right moment. Hai Ming couldn't understand what had happened, but Li Anming quickly explained. Today was the Empress Dowager's name day, and in her honor, special peach buns had been prepared for the princess. The buns looked delicious, but the prince only frowned in disbelief. He was reminded that the emperor himself was obliged to accept the empress's gifts, and he, the sixth prince, was even more incapable of refusing. Despite his hunger, Huiming was in no hurry to accept the gift. He sensed a catch. Why, when he was hungry, did they suddenly decide to bring him food? The gesture seemed suspicious. The prince demanded that they stop forcing these buns on him. He categorically refused to eat them clearly, demonstrating his stubbornness and distrust of the eunuch's intentions. Li Anming was adamant. He reminded her that this was no ordinary meal, but a gift from the Empress Dowager, and refusing it would be considered disrespectful. Even the emperor dared not oppose her will. But Huming had no intention of giving in. He coldly asked what they would do to him if he refused. His insolent tone clearly irritated the servants, but the prince remained confident. Li Anming chuckled and declared that he would then have to be force-fed. There was a menace in his voice that made Huiming uneasy, but Huiming didn't flinch. The guards grabbed him, leaving him helpless. The young man was completely confused and didn't understand the lengths these people were willing to go to carry out their orders. The eunuch declared that it didn't matter to him whether the prince wanted the buns or not. The Empress Dowager's orders were not negotiable, and the sixth prince was obliged to carry out her wishes. Emphasizing his duty, the eunuch emphatically repeated that even the emperor obeyed her words. Therefore, Huiming must eat the buns whether he liked it or not. Huiming screamed for them to leave him alone. He protested desperately and categorically refused to eat the buns, but their pressure only grew stronger. In a fit of anger, he kicked one of the buns. It flew across the room and landed with a loud slap right in the eunuch's face, stopping him in his tracks. The guards immediately rushed to their master, anxiously asking if he was okay. The whole thing seemed absurd, but no one dared laugh. Huiming coldly declared that the eunuch was to blame, calling him a monstrous old turtle, not hiding his contempt and indignation. These words infuriated the eunuch. His face flushed with anger, and without hesitation he struck the prince, putting all his anger into the blow. Huiming fell to the ground from the blow. His face was flushed with pain and blood flowed from his split lip. He barely comprehended that someone had dared to raise a hand against him. He was filled with anger and humiliation. How could this lowly servant dare strike him, the sixth prince? Such impudence seemed unthinkable. Li Anming declared that the blow was not from him personally, but on behalf of the Empress Dowager. It was punishment for disrespecting her gift, which could not be forgiven. He added that such a crime could not be ignored. The punishment was an expression of his devotion to the Empress, and he would not allow her name to be tarnished. Li Anming ordered his guards to force the prince to his knees. The order was cold and peremptory, emphasizing his determination. Huiming screamed desperately, demanding to be released. He accused the guards of exceeding their authority and had no right to treat him like that. But Li Anming remained adamant. The sixth prince must eat the peach buns to honor the Empress Dowager's health. Huiming was shocked by his insolence. He couldn't believe that this servant dared to treat him, the heir to royalty, like that. Li Anming just chuckled, adding that Huiming still considered himself an important prince, although in the eyes of others he had become a nobody, a mere pawn without power or respect. But suddenly something unexpected happened. One of the buns began to heat up in the eunuch's hands and then exploded, with a loud pop stunning everyone. The eunuch clutched his face while the servants and guards watched in horror. No one understood how such a thing was possible. Haiming realized this was no coincidence. He remembered the mysterious girl and decided that she had come to his aid again at the right moment. He turned and saw her in the tree. The girl motioned for him to remain silent. Her appearance was unexpected but reassuring. At this point, Li Anming's face was completely covered in burns. The servants and guards could not hide their horror at the sight of their master. One of the guards ordered the maid to remain silent and immediately find a doctor to help Li Anming cope with the consequences of the incident. Li Anming could barely comprehend what was happening. The pain from the burns was unbearable and his face felt swollen and damaged. Meanwhile, the girl jumped down from the tree and ran up to Huiming. She worriedly asked if he was okay, showing genuine concern. Haiming couldn't hide his joy. He had once again met the same girl who had proven so resourceful and brave at that critical moment. She smiled and asked me not to call her Tree Girl anymore. Her name was Min Ye, and she was the daughter of Prince Chen Chu Pei, the emperor's brother. Hearing this, Huiming realized she was his cousin. Her appearance at that moment seemed fateful, as if fate itself had sent her here to help him. Haiming, glancing at the scene, noticed that Min Ye had just exploded the buns. This left him genuinely surprised, but she smiled, noting his keen observation as if she'd been expecting such a remark. Min Ye honestly admitted that she had used the sacred beast's power to demonstrate her abilities. She unabashedly showed off her abilities, piquing Huiming's interest even further. He guessed she had also used this power when she manipulated the sweet soup. His guess was quite accurate, but the girl remained calm, neither confirming nor denying his words. Min Ye explained that she knew the servant intended to poison the soup, so she heated the bowl, causing the maid to drop it. Her actions were deliberate and calculated. Huiming admitted that his sister was truly incredible, but Min Yi warned that her abilities must remain a secret. If they were discovered, she would be immediately captured. He promised he'd never tell anyone about it, because such a secret shouldn't be revealed. At that moment, they heard a stomach rumble, interrupting their serious conversation. Huiming sheepishly explained that it was his stomach growling, something he did quite often. The girl shook her head with a smile, realizing how hungry the boy was. Min Ye immediately remembered she'd brought him a meat bun. She took it out, hoping it would at least slightly satisfy his hunger and lift his spirits. In the original story, Huiming lived in the palace in difficult conditions. He often had neither food nor warm clothing, so Min Yi brought him some delicious food. Haiming couldn't contain his joy. The bun was large, fragrant, and hot. It was a real treat for him, and he couldn't wait to try it. Min Yi, seeing his joy, suggested they start eating quickly. Huiming was incredibly grateful for such thoughtfulness, as he hadn't had such a delicious meal in a long time. It was completely incomprehensible to Min Yi that such a sweet boy could become a bloodthirsty tyrant in the future. She couldn't allow it. This sweet child shouldn't become cruel, and it wasn't just her father. She sincerely wanted him to change for his own sake. Huiming noticed that she was staring at him and suggested that perhaps he had overeaten, although the girl immediately reassured him. Minya declared that he must eat everything to gain strength. Without food, they would have a hard time coping with the challenges that lay ahead. However, Huiming put the bun down, which greatly surprised Minya. She couldn't understand what made him do this. He explained that he felt weak and helpless. If he were as strong as she, none of the eunuchs would be able to intimidate him. Minye asked if he really wanted to change and become as strong as she was. Her voice was serious and encouraging. Huiming answered without hesitation that he would. He thought she was incredibly cool and wanted to be like her. Minye suggested that he praise her as his teacher. She promised to accompany him and teach him everything she knew, which delighted the boy. When he tried to kneel before her, the girl quickly stopped him. she told him there was no need to humiliate himself. She simply wanted to help. Huiming, touched by the girl's kindness, realized he had found a true mentor in her. He confidently declared that he would accept her as his teacher, and she promised to teach him everything she knew. Huiming was happy as a delicious lunch had long been a rarity for him. He noted to himself that he hadn't eaten such a satisfying meal in several years, thanks to the girl's care. A joyful Min Ye smiled and suggested they go to school. She felt inspired now that she had a friend with whom she could share knowledge. But Huiming declined, head bowed. He sadly explained that he was forbidden to study, and in this life he was only allowed to endure and drag out a miserable existence. The girl confidently declared that he could now attend classes because she had already arranged for his enrollment. Her decisiveness gave Huiming a spark of hope. A stunned Huiming admiringly admitted that such a gesture was entirely to be expected from his teacher, but Min Yi merely smiled modestly, considering it a mere favor. She reminded them that they had to hurry, otherwise they risked being late for their last lesson. Huiming, slightly embarrassed, nodded and hurried after her feeling different. During class, the students were told the ancient myth of the water shepherd and the weaver, captivating them with its mysterious story. Min Ye and Huiming listened attentively to every word. Meanwhile, Yue Xing, noticing Min Ye's absence, began to worry. Her thoughts were in disarray, and she couldn't figure out where the girl had disappeared to, while the lesson seemed endless. Minya suddenly entered the classroom and announced with a smile that she was back. The students turned to look at her, surprised by her unexpected appearance and mysterious behavior. The girl added that she had managed to transfer a new student to the school. The teacher was surprised by her words and asked who she was talking about, as this hadn't been his plan. Minye proudly replied that it was the 6th Prince, Lord Huiming. Her words caused whispers and surprise among the students, and the teacher frowned. Chen Yurui, openly disdainful, asked who had given the prince permission to come here. Her cold gaze was challenging and stirred tension in the classroom, and she declared that Huiming had no right to be here, as he was just a despised outcast, living in his palace, and should remember his place. Chen Yurui also reminded him that his mother had died unable to bear the weight of her sins. Her words were cruel and sharp, like a sharp blade. Other students joined in demanding that Huiming leave. Minye was shocked by their cruelty and tried to understand why they were so angry. Huiming's mother, a concubine, fell victim to the machinations of concubine Jin. She was exiled to Langong, where, unable to bear the suffering, she committed suicide. The students' cries continued unabated. They grew increasingly vocal in their discontent, outraged that the prince had even dared to set foot in their school. Minya, trying to restore order, pulled out the student list. She emphasized that the principal had personally signed it and approved Huiming's enrollment. The teacher confirmed the girl's words, noting that the document was indeed signed by Mr. Lin. This meant that Huiming was eligible to study. Min Ye proudly declared that no one could object now. The support of the teacher and the principal put an end to their dispute. Yu Xing, maintaining his neutrality, calmly remarked that it didn't matter to him who went to school. He considered it unimportant. Chen Yurui, irritated by Yue Xing's words, replied that it was none of her business either. However, she didn't miss the opportunity to humiliate the prince. Minyi, ignoring the attacks, asked the teacher to show her where the 5th prince could sit. Her voice was firm. The teacher pointed to a seat next to her. The girl quickly approached and offered Huiming a seat, but an unexpected problem stood in her way. Chen Yurui treacherously tripped Min Ye, causing her to fall to the floor, drawing laughter from everyone around her. This humiliation couldn't go unanswered. The 5th prince couldn't help but laugh loudly. He mocked her clumsiness, calling her blind and comparing her to a caterpillar. His words were full of malicious glee. Minye, indignant, felt anger welling up inside her. She clenched her fists, fighting the urge to punch her attacker, but tried to restrain herself. Huiming and Yuesheng were able to get her up and asked if she was in pain. The girl said that she was completely fine. Yuesheng immediately ran to Qin Yurui and told him to stop bullying his sister if he wants to fight. Then he should fight properly, but he kicks his ass. The fifth prince told him to stop talking nonsense. No one was mocking his sister, and no one can confirm this. His friends immediately began to say they hadn't seen anything and knew nothing at all. They said Yuesheng was talking to the fifth prince, so he should watch his language. The teacher was in a state of profound shock. He found it hard to believe that the fifth prince and King Jin's second heir had started a quarrel again. This added to his many worries, which were already interfering with his teaching. Minye was seething with indignation, eager to punish the offender. She told her mentor that the prince had deliberately tripped her up. The girl was ready to convince her teacher to look into the matter. She added indignantly that the prince had disrupted class and humiliated his classmates. This was unacceptable, so she insisted that the prince be punished for his behavior. The teacher, for his part, felt extremely uncomfortable. He understood perfectly well that as an ordinary tutor, he had no right to treat members of the imperial family rudely, let alone take sides. Chen Yurui countered, claiming it was Minye's fault, as she was the one who stepped on his foot. He claimed he simply responded in kind, and several of his classmates immediately confirmed his assertion. The teacher suggested finding out the truth by turning to the other students, but they remained silent, avoiding getting involved in the argument. The prince insisted that Minye had started it. He claimed that everyone had seen her step on his foot and that he had merely reacted. Since the teacher couldn't see anything either, he couldn't make an objective decision. He suggested they forget the misunderstanding and return to the lesson to restore order in the classroom. However, Huiming raised his hand and declared that he had seen everything. He accused his older brother of deliberately acting and insisted that he apologize to the girl. Chen Yuerui grabbed the young man by the collar, frowning, and exclaimed that he couldn't even imagine how petty and pathetic cockroaches could even think themselves so important. He mockingly asked him to repeat what he'd said. Huiming, without flinching under his gaze, once again demanded that the fifth prince apologize, and emphasized that such words could not be left unpunished. Minye was shocked by the prince's rudeness, and someone nearby noticed that little Huiming was brave and decisive, which earned the respect of some onlookers. Chen Yuerui lunged to strike him, but Huiming, without losing his presence of mind, continued shouting that the prince had to apologize for his behavior. The fifth prince contemptuously called Huiming a dead cockroach and added that a worthless person like him had no right to tell him anything. Yuesheng couldn't help but shout loudly at the fifth prince to immediately release the sixth prince, adding that his actions were unacceptable. Chen Yuerui's friends, noticing Yuesheng's interference, grabbed her arm rudely, reminding her that it was none of her business and telling her not to poke her nose where it didn't belong. Minye desperately shouted to the teacher that the situation was getting worse, but he didn't pay any attention and continued to sit and read books as if he hadn't heard anything. The girl realized the old man had no intention of interfering with what was happening and had no hope of a peaceful resolution. This made her feel that everything depended on her. Realizing that the outcome of the situation depended on her actions, she decided to take matters into her own hands and figure out what to do to prevent things from getting out of control. Minye loudly exclaimed that the emperor had arrived and pointed to the side as if someone had actually appeared, hoping to cause panic among those present. When everyone heard the emperor's arrival, they were terrified. Chen Yuerui immediately abandoned the sixth prince and ordered him to step aside, not understanding what was happening. However, when everyone turned to the door, they found that there was no one there, and everyone was completely confused, trying to understand what had happened and what kind of jokes they had experienced. Minye did this deliberately, hoping to harness the phoenix's power. She burned the rope that held the cheerful lamp hanging directly above the fifth prince's head. Chen Yuerui was shocked by her actions and couldn't understand how she dared to lie to him. Suddenly a lamp fell on him, leaving him completely confused. He was completely confused and couldn't understand why the lamp had fallen on him. His friends were also confused and didn't know what was happening at that moment. The prince ordered someone to immediately help and remove the lamp from him. His friends rushed to his aid, assuring him that they would rescue him from this situation as quickly as possible. Minye winked at her brother, and together they tripped the two guys, leading to a comical situation in which no one could remain calm. Chen Yuerui was furious and couldn't understand what kind of stupid things these idiots were doing, completely unaware of what was actually going on around him. At this moment, the sixth prince approached from behind and nudged Chen Yuerui, who didn't immediately understand what was happening. He found himself at a loss trying to make sense of what was happening. Soon, Chen Yuerui fell to the floor and began to thrash around, hysterically begging for someone to help him, as he did not know how to get out of this ridiculous situation. He felt very dizzy and began to complain that he was dying. His friends, noticing this, rushed over and tried to help him at that moment. After class, Min Ye Yuexing and Huiming walked home together, laughing and having fun discussing what had happened. They were enjoying the moment, oblivious to the difficulties. Yuexing smiled and told the sixth prince that he had been very tough despite the absurdity of the situation. This amused him and he praised the prince for his bravery. Huiming sheepishly said that he actually thought Minye was much cooler since she was the one who knocked down the lamp using her phoenix power, and that was really impressive. Minye froze, thinking it was best not to discuss such things out loud, lest others overhear. Her brother also pointed out that if this were revealed, she would be punished. Huiming, realizing it was best to remain silent, said he wouldn't speak of it again. At that moment, a gentleman approached them, and everyone quickly fell silent, so as not to give themselves away. Hinmu informed his father that they had arrived, and everyone was very happy to see him. Minye immediately rushed to her father's side, smiling and delighted to see him. Her father picked her up and asked her how her first day at school had been, wondering if everything was okay. He was caring and wanted to know how she was feeling. Minye reported that she was fine, to which her older brother immediately responded, confirming that there were no problems and everything was going as it should. Yuexing confidently said that of course she was fine since she was under his protection. This meant that there wouldn't be any trouble or problems anytime soon. Chu Pei noticed with a smile that his son was speaking very loudly and expressively, which caused him slight surprise and joy from observing such bright moments. The gentleman heard someone pay him respects by calling him emperor, and added a wish for long life and health. This was part of the usual etiquette he knew. Chu Pei asked permission to congratulate the sixth prince on his admission to the academy, wishing to express his best wishes and support for this important event in the prince's life. Minye could not even imagine that her father, despite all his virtues, would die in the future at the hands of this sweet, seemingly harmless young man. The father noticed that the day was drawing to an end and it was starting to get dark, so he suggested that everyone turn back so that they could get home before nightfall and finish their work. Huiming approached the girl, inviting her to stay with him today. He suggested she might want to spend time in his company as the evening was still young. Huiming asked Minye not to leave. Assuring her that they would definitely return, he was filled with both hope and anxiety, hoping that their return together would be successful. Minye changed the direction of her manhua's departure arc, setting the beginning of summer on the festival. This meant peach buns became the only option for their next step. Although the problem had been solved, it didn't mean complete victory and the task wasn't fully accomplished. They planned to continue their efforts to achieve further success. Without further action, Huiming risked death at the hands of concubine Jin, who was prepared to take his life unless decisive steps were taken. Minye, worried, asked her father again if it was possible for her to stay with the sixth prince. She hoped for his support in this important matter. My father strongly advised against spending the night in the outer chambers, known as the Cold Palace. This place was reserved for the emperor's concubines and was dangerous for everyone. Haiming, with tears in his eyes, begged her not to leave. He couldn't bear the thought of her separation and sincerely asked her to stay by his side despite all the difficulties. Minyi, despite his resistance, asked her father to allow her to stay at least for one night, hoping that he would understand her feelings and allow this compromise. Her father, however, was categorically against it, feeling it was too risky and inappropriate. He couldn't agree even though he was concerned about her wishes. Minye was deeply upset by the rejection, and her older brother Xingmu immediately noticed her sadness. He tried to reassure his sister, offering a solution that might help. Xingmu suggested staying with his sister and monitoring the situation. Yuixing, noticing the suggestion, supported him, assuring him that everything would be fine and there would be no problems. Minyi realized this meant she could truly stay with the prince. Everything had finally worked out, so that her wishes could finally be fulfilled, and she felt a sense of relief. The prince insistently urged his master to agree, and this created difficulties for Chu Pei. It was difficult for him to refuse the request, knowing how important this moment was for everyone. Chu Pei, understanding the gravity of the situation, said he would go and make all arrangements for their convenience. This was considered an excellent decision, and everyone began preparing for what lay ahead. Minye told Xingmu about concubine Jin and her plans to poison Li Anming. She feared their protection would not be sufficient to prevent the threat. Minye realized that even if she wanted to protect Huiming, she couldn't remain in the cold palace forever. This would create additional complications for her plans. Huiming remarked that if someone could be there constantly, these problems wouldn't arise. He was waiting for someone to solve this problem for their protection. Xingmu proposed seeking a long-term solution to the problem. They needed to find a patron for the prince, and that would alleviate most of their worries and concerns, as the most powerful figure in the harem is the queen. If she supports Huiming, concubine, Jin will be powerless and the prince will be safe. Minyi, after thinking for a moment, realized she'd completely forgotten about the queen. She didn't understand how it had happened, but now it was important to correct the mistake. Minye decided to seek the queen's support. The prince didn't object to this decision, understanding that it was an important step for their shared safety. Xingmu interrupted their conversation and asked how they planned to do this. The queen, a Buddhist, although seemingly cold, was actually a kind-hearted person. Xingmu noted that the queen had lost her mother at a young age, just like Huiming. If he showed his best, she would surely show him support and affection. Xingmu noted that he didn't know the queen and couldn't understand how Minye could be so confident in her reaction. He didn't know where she got such information. Minye explained that she would simply assume she had supernatural powers. She had read the original work and knew how everything would unfold. Xingmu was shocked, unable to believe his ears. He couldn't understand how such a power could exist, given that it allowed Minyi to predict people's futures. Meanwhile, Yuexing brought in a huge watermelon, and everyone couldn't figure out where he got it from. His action left everyone amazed, but the watermelon was a real surprise. Yuexing said he made this watermelon himself at school, and it was a truly interesting and cool result. Everyone was delighted to see it and immediately tried it. Everyone was happy because they could now enjoy this watermelon, and the moment was made even sweeter by its presence. The watermelon was a great addition. However, Xingmu suspected that the watermelon might have come from the school storeroom and that they would have to pay for it the next day. This raised his doubts. Despite their suspicions, everyone decided to simply enjoy the moment and share the watermelon. Ultimately, it brightened their day. Yuexing, being observant, noticed that someone else might be nearby. He expressed his belief that something was happening in that direction and it required attention. Minyi immediately realized something was wrong and suspected that the eunuch had probably returned. His presence boded ill and she was on guard. Heiming, noticing her anxiety, assured everyone there was no need to fear. They were sufficient to counter any potential threat, and he was ready to act. Yushin remarked that if anyone decided to bully them, he would take such good care of them that even their parents wouldn't recognize them. He was ready to do anything to protect them. Xingmu, on the other hand, wondered what would happen if he were hit and realized he would have to bear the responsibility. He didn't think it would be so easy. The older brother, recognizing the danger, said he had a better plan. He was confident he could resolve the situation more effectively. They began discussing the details of the plan, confident in their preparedness. Everything was ready, and they felt they could act at the next moment. Heiming was deeply angry at those who had tried to ruin his image. He had no intention of letting them off easy, and promised to do everything he could to make them suffer. He ordered his guards to find all the culprits and punish them. The search began, and everyone was ready to act quickly to deal with this threat. The man told the eunuch that they thought they had found someone. This news caused alarm, and everyone braced themselves for a possible encounter with the intruders. When they peered into the bushes, they saw Blue, Fire, and Huming, who looked quite terrifying. All this made a strong impression on them. Everyone immediately became frightened and began running in panic, and the eunuch, greatly frightened, didn't manage to escape in time. This added even more chaos to the situation. As the guards tried to escape, someone tossed them a watermelon rind, causing them to slip. This led to a comical and unexpected fall for everyone involved. Li Anming screamed, accusing everyone of being demons. The prince, frightened and terrified, lay on the floor, begging to be saved, unsure what to do in such a situation. The prince screamed again, demanding that no one come near him. He desperately tried to drive everyone away, locked in his panic, refusing to let anyone approach, fearing harm. The prince soon noticed red drops dripping onto his face, but he couldn't figure out where they were coming from. Unsure of the cause, he became even more worried and frightened. The prince looked up and saw someone on top of him. This sight completely frightened him, and with even greater fear, he began to try to free himself from the man. It was Xingmu. The man, terrified, began to run away, begging not to be killed. He claimed he was a good man and that his actions were truly harmless and kind. The children, seeing this situation, began to laugh, which was unexpected and amusing. Minye, who was also supposed to go out, was already ready, but managed to run away before this happened. Xingmu said that seeing the queen during normal times was quite difficult. She was usually only seen on holidays, but every 5th of the month she went to the temple. Yuxing noted that tomorrow was the 5th. Tomorrow after school, the queen would pass by the academy, and if they didn't make it, they'd have to wait a month. Minye suggested that tomorrow they should definitely ask the queen for Huming's protection. This became their primary goal for the near future to help him. Xingmu thought it wouldn't be so difficult to win the queen's favor. To do so, the prince would have to appear as poor and miserable as possible to evoke sympathy. Yuxin said he understood. They would need to throw the half-dead Huiming at the queen's feet, and then she would surely move and respond to their plea for help. Huiming objected, saying there was no need to beat him. The girl began asking what he meant, why he was saying such strange, nonsensical things. Xingmu, hearing this, exclaimed that no one had said anything stupid, and that if Huiming wanted, he would deal with him himself first, so that everything would go according to plan. He explained that they needed to make Huiming look as miserable and pathetic as possible, so that the concubine would get angry and start torturing him again, which would attract the queen's attention. At this moment, Minye will be able to pitifully ask the queen to protect Huiming, evoking her mercy and willingness to help in a difficult situation to change his fate. Minye noticed that this was indeed a good idea, and so she confidently stated that her brother could be relied upon in such an important matter as helping Huiming. Minye also added that she just wants the concubine, who wronged the 6th prince, to get what she deserves for her actions in order to restore justice. Huiming said there was no need to worry because everything would be fine. He was confident they could handle the situation and everything would be resolved without any problems. Xingmu explained the plan for tomorrow to everyone. Meanwhile, in the Guihua palace, the eunuch was beating his servant, frustrated by his incompetence and failure to complete the task. The eunuch was angry that the servant could not cope with the child and dared to return. Considering him useless and unreliable, completely disappointed with his actions, Li Anming begged the lady to spare him, claiming that he was surrounded by demons that were about to swallow him whole and that he needed to leave immediately. The woman, not believing his words, kicked him and told him to stop talking nonsense. She didn't understand what demons he was talking about and told him to return to the southeast. Li Anming tried to persuade her again, explaining that there were indeed demons around and that those blue lights and drops of blood on his face were evidence that they were in danger. The eunuch chuckled and asked if Li Anming was truly so stupid that he couldn't tell the difference between red ink and real blood. She doubted his story. Li Anming was shocked to discover it was just red ink and that he had been tricked. He couldn't believe he had found himself in such a preposterous situation. The servant asked the mistress to calm down. It was all because of that idiot who couldn't deal with the sixth prince these days. Perhaps the product of someone's spiritual energy. Everything was calm, the demon couldn't appear. So suddenly it seems that the sixth prince himself did everything to sow chaos. The woman said that the child was just a piece of trash. He had been watched since birth. It was impossible for him to have the power of a holy beast. The man said that the old master didn't mean that it didn't matter. Only the sixth principal possessed the power of the holy beast. She just needed to convey that someone was chasing her in the cold palace, but strongly take him to the magic arts department and introduce a trusted person to him, then the goal would be achieved. The lady noted that the actions that were being discussed were indeed logical, and it seemed to mean that the person would definitely not be able to survive in this situation. However, as it turned out, the emperor wasn't a problem. The lady was planning to meet with a representative of the Department of Magical Arts immediately. She had no concerns about the emperor. She gave the order to head to the palace with the troops. Meanwhile, the children, despite the late hour, were already asleep, but Xingmu could not sleep. He was weary and unable to rest peacefully. Xingmu sat at the table, his eyes gradually closing from fatigue. But soon he heard shouts that they were surrounded. An alarm had been sounded, and no one was allowed to leave the premises. He realized that they were surrounded by a fairly large group, and quickly began trying to wake the others up so that they would be ready for possible action. Minye was frightened by what was happening, and Yuexing could not wake up, continuing to sleep and not realizing the seriousness of the situation. He angrily asked them to stop making noise as it was too early and he didn't want to get up. Besides, he didn't want to go to school despite what was happening. At this moment, strangers entered the room and approached the sixth prince. But upon seeing him, they realized that other heirs were also in the room, which added to their uneasiness. Xingmu immediately noticed a girl he'd never seen before. He realized she was likely Emperor Jin's adopted daughter, even though he'd never met her before. Xingmu turned to the man and asked what had brought them to this cold palace at such a late hour, especially with nights. He remarked that the situation seemed unusual. The man replied that they had heard rumors of demons supposedly living in the cold palace and suspected that someone might be using the power of the holy beast. So they brought along a specialist from the Department of Magical Arts to investigate what was happening and determine if there was any threat associated with it. The situation became more complicated and the girl began to worry, greatly realizing that the events unfolding in the cold palace could be much more dangerous than they had imagined. Li Enming claimed there were no ghosts, that the whole thing had been staged to scare him to death. He claimed he wasn't finished with those who orchestrated it. The eunuch turned to him and said that the word was not given and the master must find out whether the children possessed the power of the sacred beast or not before drawing conclusions. The lord approached the sixth prince, and his uncles inquiring which of them would be willing to be the first to test their strength. He was determined to act decisively and quickly. The eunuch suggested starting with the youngest in seniority. Everyone agreed, but they were a little nervous, so the sixth prince stood first, preparing for the test. A powerful emotion gripped those present, but the sixth prince stood resolutely before the youngest. Everyone awaited his reaction, hoping for his confidence and strength. The prince declared that he didn't need to undergo a test because he already possessed the power of a sacred beast. Everyone around him was shocked by his confident words. The eunuch insisted on testing, claiming that the master must verify the prince's words. No words could change the decision, and the test continued. The man confirmed that the sixth prince indeed possessed the power of the fire phoenix. This astonished everyone, as few expected such a turn of events. Minya couldn't believe it. It seemed impossible. It was now clear they were trying to frame the prince, and that was extremely dishonest of them. The servant congratulated the sixth prince on his strength, and reminded him that all children who possess the power of a sacred beast must serve the state in the interests of the emperor. The servant informed him that the prince must go to the Department of Magical Arts. He was not to be involved in conflicts and was to avoid inappropriate treatment. As he said goodbye to his little sister, the prince noticed her sadness. The girl was upset, not wanting him to leave, and was ready to do anything to stop him. The girl wanted to use the divine beast's power to help her brother, but her older brother stopped her. He knew it would lead to grave consequences. She lowered her head in despair. Her brother was furious, knowing that if she used her power now, all her abilities would be revealed, and it would destroy everything. Minya apologized, but she couldn't remain idle. She feared for the prince's life and was certain that without magical power, he wouldn't survive this ordeal. Minya decided that she should confess and go with them in the prince's place, hoping that her sacrifice would save his life and bring at least some result. Her brother was furious and raised his hand to punish her, but seeing her bitter tears, he softened and stroked her head, realizing the gravity of the situation. Tingmu asked Min yet if she had considered her father's feelings. He reminded her that if she were captured, the consequences would be disastrous for the entire family. He added that the prince would not be released, as the plan from the start was to kill him. Minya would only become another victim in their unfair game. Minya was at a loss as to what to do, and tried to somehow convince her brother that there were other ways to avoid this horrific outcome. Singmu said he didn't know what to do and bowed his head. Without any options, they were doomed, and he was having trouble finding a solution. Yue Xing was in despair, seeing that even her clever brother had no idea what to do. She felt their end was near and there was no hope left. The concubine received word that the sixth prince was being taken to the Department of Magical Arts. His powers were not detected, and magical spells would be used on him tomorrow. The woman said everything was clear, and now he could go. There was no pity in her eyes, no doubt about the correctness of their actions. He expressed concern about the other children. When they came for the sixth prince, 3 of the prince's children were in the room with him, which alarmed him. The woman remarked that if the prince didn't have powers, then one of the children must have. This raised doubts, especially regarding the recently adopted girl. The woman suggested that the girl recently adopted by the prince might be the one with the power. Her power could be exactly what they were looking for. The servant added that the prince's sons had already been tested and their powers had not been detected. Therefore, the girl was perhaps the possessor of the power. The woman asked who she was, as her strength hadn't yet been tested. Anxiety grew within her, and she prepared to act without delay. The woman said Minye probably possessed power which boded ill. She was willing to spare the prince this risk. The woman added that Minye needed to be gotten rid of as quickly as possible. Her power could be dangerous, especially if she was the prince's daughter. The servant promised to send guards for the girl tomorrow. It was important to act quickly before something unexpected happened. The woman insisted that she be seized without delay to avoid any problems with the prince. The main thing was to resolve the issue with the prince, not complicate the situation. She added that if they captured the girl, it would definitely cause concern for the prince, and this would lead to unpredictable consequences for their plan. The servant tried to object, but the woman declared that if they didn't eliminate Minyi, their plans would surely fail. He should have realized that. The woman said they could begin work at sunrise. They needed to make sure everything in the Department of Magical Arts would go according to plan. The woman ordered everyone to head to the department immediately. Jingmu reported that the palace was ready and they could act without delay. Chupei was quite surprised to see that the children were already awake. This seemed odd to him as it was early. Xingmu was also astonished and asked his father what he was doing. They're so early, not expecting his visit. Yuxi, not hiding his thoughtfulness, explained that they were just about to go see their father. This coincidence caused a slight confusion in everyone. However, Chupei couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. To ensure the children would be all right, he decided to take them home as soon as the palace became accessible to the public. Minye, unable to contain her emotions, rushed to her father. She excitedly told him that Huming had been in trouble and that she urgently needed his help to try to help him. Chu Pei, noticing his daughter's agitation, asked excitedly what had happened to Huiming, trying to understand the seriousness of the situation. Min Ye quickly explained that Huiming had been captured and taken to the magical arts department, where they intended to perform dangerous spells on him. She added that the eunuch Li Anhai had done this, claiming that Huiming possessed the power of a sacred beast. The soldiers were most likely mocking him now. The girl anxiously emphasized the urgent need to rescue the prince. Chupai felt the urge to help, but he was wary of getting involved again in a conflict involving the powers of sacred beasts. He also feared for the safety of his children. Minya, her face filled with alarm, declared that the sixth prince had sacrificed himself to save her. If not for his sacrifice, she would have fallen into enemy hands long ago. Chupei sighed regretfully and firmly stated that the situation was too dangerous. He decided they needed to return home immediately to avoid unnecessary risks. Despair overwhelmed Minye and she fell to her knees before her father. With tears in her eyes, she begged him to save the sixth prince, insisting it was necessary not only for his sake but also for their families. The father was shocked by his daughter's behavior. Her sincere requests made him feel uneasy for the first time and made him question the significance of her words. Yuxing joined his sister's pleas, saying that the sixth prince had shown incredible courage. Thanks to his actions, Min Yi's strength remained a secret from those around her. Xingmu, with undisguised respect, added that they were all immensely grateful to the sixth prince. He urged his father to help as he truly deserved it. The father noticed that his children had suddenly matured. Their words and actions revealed not only responsibility, but also a genuine commitment to noble deeds. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the father made a decision. He was not the kind of man to forget kindness or leave someone to die. Therefore, he firmly vowed to save the sixth prince. Hearing this, the girl couldn't help but smile. Her heart filled with gratitude, and she sincerely thanked her father for his wisdom and support. Xu Pei briefly informed them that they were about to go to an important place. After that, he confidently led everyone along without going into unnecessary details. Yuxin, slightly perplexed, asked his brother what they should do now and where they were headed. Xingmu replied that they should study and wait for news from their father. At this time, everyone in the Department of Magical Arts believed that the sixth prince would certainly receive assistance. He was absolutely certain of this and had no doubt of a favorable outcome. He thought it was the people he was expecting who had come for him, but instead the door opened and a man connected to the case walked in. Huiming realized it was a false alarm. Hearing that the sixth prince had already awakened, the man rejoiced and announced that they should now proceed to the incantation chamber. His tone was firm. Huiming refused to go citing hunger. He would first demand food and only then agree to follow them. Huiming also stated that he had no intention of going without his mentor's presence. The man chuckled and sarcastically asked if he thought anyone cared about his status there. The prince, without changing his position, firmly said that they could beat him to death, but until he ate, he would not move from the spot. The man became angry, grabbed him by the neck, and warned him that he was being too brazen. He added that there was nothing stopping him from killing him right then and there. The man was already mentally imagining how to deal with him. He decided it was simple: kill the prince and then pretend it was the result of magical influence. With a cruel grin, he said that the prince's life was of no importance to anyone, so they would calmly send him to the next world, and no one would even notice. Suddenly, the prince summoned all his courage and bit the man on the arm. The man howled in pain and instinctively let go. In a rage, the man pushed the prince, who slammed hard against the wall. The anger in the man's eyes grew even brighter. The man was ready to deliver the decisive blow, but the prince suddenly rushed forward and hit him in the legs with his head. The blow was so powerful that the man collapsed to the floor. The pain paralyzed him and he couldn't even move. The noise brought security guards into the room. They looked at the prone man and asked in surprise what had happened. The man writhed on the floor, and the guards, looking at each other, tried to understand what exactly their master meant, since he could not explain anything. Taking advantage of the general commotion, the sixth prince began to slip away unnoticed. The man, through the pain, tried to speak, but was unable to. Finally, the man gathered his strength and shouted for the guards to watch their backs, as the prince was escaping. However, when they turned around, they didn't see him. The master, irritated by their inaction, ordered the fugitive to be immediately found and captured. The guards rushed after him, hoping to quickly capture him. Chang'an sat in his quiet corner, enjoying the solitude. He loved the warmth of the cup of tea in his hands, the scent filling the space and the harmony emanating from the surrounding flowers. It was a moment of true bliss. But suddenly the idyll was shattered by a sharp sound. Chang'an choked on his tea as he heard the clatter of hooves. Someone was approaching. This unexpected intrusion into his world was unsettling. Soon he saw the guests. It was Min Ye and her father. The girl couldn't hide her joy at meeting the teacher. Her smile lit up her face and her eyes sparkled with delight. However, the joy of the meeting was marred. Chang'an noticed that part of his flower field had been damaged. This loss saddened him, as he had poured his heart and soul into this place. Chu Pei immediately addressed him, saying that they needed to act quickly. However, Chang'an, lost in his emotions, seemed not to hear his words, brushing off his hasty requests. His anger was directed at the culprit, the horse that had trampled the flowers. Chang'an loudly protested, demanding an explanation and asking when Chu Pei would finally learn to respect the work of others. In response, Chu Pei apologized and promised to compensate for the damage. He emphasized the emergency and the urgent need for Chang'an's assistance, practically begging for his cooperation. Min Yi, supporting her father, sincerely insisted that Chang'an simply had to help the sixth prince. Her words were measured, but there was a hint of concern in her voice. Chang'an was confused. He tried to understand what was going on and what they were planning. His wariness grew, and he demanded clarification. They explained that the sixth prince had been unfairly accused. The people from the magic department suspected he possessed the power of a sacred beast and captured him based solely on that suspicion. However, Chang'an couldn't understand how any of this related to him. He felt like he was being dragged into other people's problems for no good reason. Chu Pei explained that Chang'an was a renowned master of the sacred arts. His reputation could help if he agreed to accompany them to the sacred magic department to assess the prince's abilities. But Chang'an couldn't simply agree. He'd once spoken out against the magic department, and now he couldn't return. For him, it was tantamount to death. Besides, the magic department brought back unpleasant memories. It was a place filled with too many horrors, and returning, there would be a great trial for him. Min Ye anxiously reminded them that time was short. If they didn't hurry, the sixth prince would be arrested, and then it would be too late to change anything. Changjin firmly declared that he was merely a hermit, possessing knowledge of the holy beasts but unable to influence the fate of others. He sympathized with the prince but could not help. Despite his words, Min Ye continued to plead with him, her eyes full of pleading, looked at the teacher with hope, causing him to feel conflicted. Xu Pei reassured his daughter, assuring her that he would convince the teacher. His confidence sounded firm, but a glimmer of cunning intent flickered in his eyes. Xu Pei approached Chang'an, clapped him on the shoulder, and said something encouraging. However, his actions soon revealed that his persuasion was harsher than it seemed. Xu Pei noted ironically that his method of persuasion had been effective. He literally knocked Changjin unconscious to stop him from resisting. Xu Pei told Min Ye to mount his horse, emphasizing that they must immediately go and rescue the prince. There was no more time to think. Concerned about the weight, the girl asked if the horse could support 3 people. Her doubt seemed logical given the journey ahead. Xu Pei assured her with a smile that their horse named Jade was the first horse in Daki and would easily cope with this task. Nefertiti was Xu Pei's favorite horse, and he had confidence in its abilities. This noble beast had proven its endurance and reliability time and again. Meanwhile, the 6th prince continued his escape, pursued by guards who seemed unwilling to give up. But suddenly he found himself trapped. The prince realized his escape route was blocked and felt his situation hopeless. The guards, panting from the long chase, told him he had nowhere else to run. They were tired and wanted him to surrender voluntarily. They tried to convince him that resistance was pointless. No harm would come to him if he simply followed them. He had been warned that force would be used if he didn't comply. He had to go with them anyway. It was inevitable. But then Huming shouted that his father was here. The guards froze, assuming he was talking about the emperor. Fear instantly appeared on their faces. They immediately bowed, greeting the supposed Emperor Huiming. Taking advantage of the situation, thought what naive fools they were. He grinned as he ran, asking who they were greeting, since there was no one nearby. His ploy worked, and he continued his escape. But the deception soon unraveled. The prince found himself backed into a corner, and his tricks were no longer effective. His hopes were fading. In a panic, he bumped into someone. It was a eunuch who immediately blocked his path. The situation changed dramatically. The eunuch declared that he had finally found the prince. His search had been long and difficult. He emphasized that everyone had been worried about his fate. But Huiming met his words with irritation. He shouted, accusing the eunuch of hypocrisy, calling him a wicked old man who couldn't be trusted. The man calmly replied that none of that mattered. The prince had to go with him as the holy mage was already waiting for him. But the prince refused to comply, prompting the eunuch to threaten him if he continued to resist slavery, and even greater humiliation awaited him. Heiming couldn't understand where Minye was and why she wasn't there to save him. His hopes for help were fading with each passing second. Despite all the assurances, Yue Sheng once again shared his worries with his brother. He admitted that he was haunted by the current situation as their family's well-being was at stake. Jingmu, trying to reassure her brother, noted that since their father had taken on the task, they could relax. His skills and experience were so outstanding that there was simply no doubt about his success. She added that her father would not only complete the task, but do it without a single mistake. He would definitely return with their sister safe and sound, as it was his strength and determination that had always saved their family. Hingmu also reminded Yue Xing that his main task today was to return home, get ready, and go to school. She emphasized that he should avoid getting distracted and causing unnecessary problems now. The brother also noted that it was important for them to strictly adhere to their plan. All they could do was patiently wait for their sister and the 6th prince to return, remaining calm. He added that if their efforts today proved futile, the situation would only worsen. The concubine was prepared to do anything to achieve her goals, sparing neither effort nor expense. Yuexing understood the gravity of the situation. He had been strictly ordered to stay out of trouble as part of the overall plan, depended on him, and it was crucial not to let his family down. In response, Yuexin firmly promised to do his utmost. He vowed to avoid mistakes and study diligently, fully focusing on his duties. It was time to go to school. His older brother walked Yuexing to the door, wishing him a good day and reminding him that everything would be fine as long as everyone did their part. Meanwhile, Chu Pei, urging his trusty horse on, quickly reached the palace where the Department of Sacred Magic was located. His goal was to resolve an urgent matter. Turning to the girl, he informed her that they were almost there. Min Ye, full of determination, assured her that the gentleman would definitely wait for them as the journey was only a short one. However, the guards at the palace entrance stopped Chu Pei, informing him that the Sacred Magic Department was closed to visitors today. Their stern tone indicated the impossibility of compromise. Chu Pei only hugged his daughter tighter and asked her to hold on as he was going to jump over the high fence, ignoring the prohibitions. Having breached the barrier, he left the guards no choice, causing them surprise and mild shock. Such a violation was clearly out of the ordinary. The guards stood there, unsure how to react. They were trying to figure out if it was even possible to jump over the fence, as if it weren't an obstacle, but a mere formality. Meanwhile, screams could be heard inside the palace. Huiming was tied up and loudly demanding to be released, his voice echoing throughout the halls. However, the eunuch ignored the pleas. He firmly ordered work to begin, wasting no time on unnecessary conversations and doubts. The man promised to take care of His Highness. Li Anming informed him that the situation was extremely complicated as the Lord Prince had intervened, adding further complications to their plan. This is an unexpected visit, and despite his intentions, they must act decisively. They can't delay him any longer. Their goal is to eliminate the prince who can no longer save him. Li Anming insisted there was nothing to fear. The Empress herself was their protector. They needed to act quickly and decisively, as he didn't want to contradict his father's wishes. The sixth prince is in the palace and they have little time. They must hurry to reach him before it's too late. Li Anming ordered them to stop, as entry to this area was strictly prohibited. It was important to obey all restrictions, otherwise problems could arise. Chu Pei, displeased, asked who he was trying to persuade the man to move out of the way, but he continued to stand, not intending to give in. Li Anming introduced himself respectfully. He was the head of security, responsible for the palace's security, and he had to find out why Chu Pei had come here. Chu Pei, irritated, declared that he did not intend to talk to him and demanded to be let through, not wanting to waste time on unnecessary explanations. The man grabbed his arm tightly, saying he couldn't let him through. The Department of Sacred Magic was a secure area, and entry was strictly restricted. Chu Pei angrily shouted that the man was insolent and forcibly pulled his hand out of his grip, continuing to insist on his right to pass. He warned that this was the last time he would ask, but Li Anming again refused to let him through, claiming that it was impossible. The Department of Sacred Magic is secret and reports directly to the Emperor. Even he is not allowed to enter without a compelling reason. Chu Pei had no intention of stopping, saying that he would still achieve his goal, and would not pay attention to prohibitions, not seeing them as a threat. Li Anming, in response, warned that if Chu Pei did not comply, he would be punished according to the laws and regulations of the guard. The guards approached, ready to take measures to force Chu Pei to comply and not create further problems for the palace. Chu Pei, smiling mockingly, said that Li Anming was just a small fry, and continued to confidently move forward, unwilling to give up. Li Anming explained that he was doing his duty by guarding the inner hall from outsiders. If anyone attempted to enter, he would have no choice but to take action. Li Anming warned that if a battle broke out, the swords could harm anyone, and it was difficult to predict how it would end. A random skirmish can result in injuries not only to people, but also to horses and even children if a fight breaks out. Chu Pei grabbed Li Anming by the face and pushed him away, Ordering him to stay away from his daughter, he didn't want him anywhere near her and was prepared to protect her at any cost. Chupei told his daughter to hide behind him and close her eyes. He promised to open them only when the situation was safe so she wouldn't see what was about to happen. Minya turned away in fear and closed her eyes. Her heart pounded, worried about what might happen in this dangerous moment. She felt the tension all around her. Li Anming approached His Highness and asked him what he intended to do. Noticing how the situation was becoming increasingly tense and threatening, he sought an answer but didn't know what to expect. The Lord, as always, calmly and reservedly replied that he did not want his daughter to witness what he intended to do in this dangerous situation. He intended to act decisively. Confused, Li Anming asked what exactly he meant. He didn't understand the Lord's motives in this situation and was completely at a loss to understand what was happening. Chupei, unable to contain himself, slapped Li Anming across the face, stunned that he dared to threaten him. Chupei couldn't understand who this man was who was behaving so brazenly. He saw this man as a waste of space, worthless. His existence merely overshadowed the nobleman, and Chupei had no intention of leaving him alone. Chupei couldn't understand how this filthy dog dared to threaten him. He was certain this man had no place in this world, since he was so bold in challenging him. Security intervened and demanded that Chupei remove his hands from Li Anming. This caused some confusion, but the security understood they had to intervene in the conflict. Chupei, without holding back, shouted for everyone to shut up, which startled the guards. They immediately fell silent, realizing he was dead serious. Chupei made it clear that this was none of their business. He warned that anyone who dared interfere with him would be punished. No one could stand in his way. Chupei continued to beat Li Anming, giving him no respite. His eyes burned with anger, and he had no intention of stopping until he finished what he had started. After Chupei finished, he said his daughter could open her eyes. Minye glanced at him and realized he'd been severely punished for his insolence. Chupei said they could move on. He was satisfied with the result and ready to continue on his way, confident they wouldn't bother him any longer. Chupei was very angry because it seemed they still didn't want to let him through. This irritated him, and he knew he had to act decisively to convince them. But all the guards quickly moved out of the way, making way for him. Chupei felt some relief, calmed down, and assured that he wouldn't encounter any more obstacles. Changjin fell from his horse and didn't know where he was. Everything around him seemed blurry, and he couldn't immediately make sense of what was happening. As he tried to gather his thoughts, Chupei said it was time for Changjin to wake up as they had arrived at the sacred magic department. The man was furious, and his words were full of rage as he began cursing at his master. Chupei ordered him to stop shouting and follow him. However, Chan continued shouting, expressing his hatred for his master, which only increased the tension. Meanwhile, the master attempted to perform a ritual with the sixth principle, but it refused to budge. The magic resisted, and it was clear that not all was so simple in this process. The eunuch asked why Chupei was screaming. He reminded them that they needed to cast the spell quickly as time was running out, and they had to act quickly and effectively. The man explained that it was not his fault, but the prince simply did not want to cooperate with him, showing stubbornness and ignoring all attempts to negotiate. To achieve the result, he had to be stunned first, and this decision really seemed right, so all that remained was to carry out the plan. The man stated that the boy himself forced him to act in this way, which forced him to take a stick and prepare for the next step. He almost swung at the boy, but suddenly Li Anming's body flew into the hall, attracting the attention of everyone present and completely changing the course of events. The man was confused, not understanding what had happened, which is why all attention switched to what was happening and to the person who had just appeared. At that moment, the gentleman entered the room with his daughter and Changjin, thereby creating even more tension, which only intensified the situation. Chupei said that it was he who was to blame for what happened, And the prince, hearing this, felt joy, because his sister Minyi had finally appeared. The eunuch greeted the prince and asked permission to find out why he had beaten him, which left him puzzled and wanting to get to the bottom of the matter. The master, about to enter, found himself in a situation where this servant, using his name, did not allow him to pass, behaving in a manner unbecoming of his rank. Chu Pei, knowing how much the master valued his reputation and how strictly he trained his subordinates, considered it necessary to intervene and put the disobedient one in his place. The man understood that the master would not tolerate such behavior, and that he would definitely intervene to punish the boy for disobedience and disrespect. Li Enhai noticed that His Highness was too merciful to him even despite his insignificance, and believed that the lowly servant deserved to be punished. He also inquired as to why the gentleman was here, and Chu Pei explained that the rumors about the sixth principle of Langong spoke of its connection with the power of the sacred beast. Despite the rumors, Chu Pei doubted their veracity, believing that erroneous assessments could be misleading and should not be accepted as truth without verification. Chu Pei decided to bring in an expert who could conduct a thorough assessment of the sixth prince's abilities in order to avoid possible mistakes and misunderstandings. Mr. Shu Chang'an, who had previously worked in the sacred magic department, was chosen for this mission, and only his assessment could be decisive in this matter. The man was known as a first-class genius in the magical arts, and his presence in the hall only raised the status of everything that was happening, adding importance to the situation. The eunuch greeted the gentleman joyfully, emphasizing his outstanding merits and recognizable name, which was widely known in the Department of Sacred Magic. Chang'an, however, was not pleased with his presence here. He admitted that his purpose here was to prevent possible harm, although he himself would have preferred to be elsewhere. Conducting an assessment of the sixth prince could guarantee the correctness of the results, and Chu Pei believed that this would provide peace of mind and confidence in the correctness of their actions. Chu Pei was extremely interested in what this man was planning. Everything seemed calm in Langong, and perhaps the result was truly connected to the power of the sacred beast. If it turns out that it is not the sixth prince, then it will mean that they have caught the wrong person, and then their plans will be in jeopardy. The man reported that his servant had no idea what was going on. Chu Pei responded by suggesting that he test his master's abilities himself to avoid further misunderstandings. The eunuch said that Miss Minye was at the scene, and she did not pass the identification if it turns out that the power of the holy beast is not possessed by the sixth principle. It is possible that the lady has it. If he wants to re-evaluate the sixth prince, he must allow him to evaluate Miss Minyi. The gentleman realized that everything that was happening was the result of a curse, and that the cause of all the troubles was this eunuch whose presence was spoiling everything, destroying the peace. At the training ground, Chen Yurui was extremely tired, and besides, he still had to practice archery, which seemed like a daunting task. Everything was going wrong, and his patience was wearing thin. He spotted Yue Sheng and quickly came up with a way to distract himself. He began feigning dizziness to avoid the arrow. He continued spinning in all directions. Chen took aim at Yue Sheng and accidentally fired an arrow, which miraculously hit him right in the hat, although it could have hit him in the head if he had not ducked in time. Yue Sheng couldn't understand what was happening. He screamed, asking what Chen was doing and where he was aiming. He didn't believe Chen had missed by accident and thought he was shooting on purpose. Chen Yurui tried to justify himself by saying that it was an accident, although in fact he knew for sure that he never missed even if it looked like a mistake. Yue Xing was indignant and said that he had asked for it himself, was ready to deal with him with the intention of settling the matter with his fists if Chen did not calm down and apologize. Chen Yurui wasn't embarrassed to suggest a duel as he was bored and had nothing better to do. He calmly said he'd be happy to arrange a fight if Yue Sheng was so inclined. However, Yue Sheng suddenly remembered his older brother's advice to avoid conflict and avoid unnecessary trouble. He decided to abandon the fight. Yue Sheng admitted his mistake, apologized, and said it was his fault. He decided to step aside to avoid disturbing the situation and return to training to avoid further conflict. Chen Yuerui was shocked by these words and couldn't understand what was happening. He looked at Yue Sheng's retreating figure in surprise, unsure what to make of the situation. Shocked, he turned to his friends asking how he could have just spoken to him so formally. His friends were also confused and didn't know what to think. They said it was very strange as they had never heard Yue Sheng address them in such a way. Everyone was perplexed, as the guy had always been straightforward and decisive. Chen Yuerui couldn't believe how crazy this guy seemed. He thought there was something wrong with his head and it was clearly related to his behavior. Chen was certain that Yue Sheng had either gone crazy or had been bewitched. He sensed that he was too quiet today and was certain he was plotting something. Suddenly, Chen had an idea. He realized he could use this situation to test Yue Sheng and draw him out into conversation. This would give him a chance to have some fun. It was time for a break in training, and Chen and the others decided to take a break before continuing. He pondered how to proceed and what to do about this situation. Time passed slowly and the training never seemed to end. Chen wondered how his father and sister were doing while he was absorbed in his training and thoughts. The fifth prince approached Yue Sheng and said he had often seen his actions as a challenge. Now he was ready to accept this challenge and decide who was stronger by engaging him in combat. Yue Sheng, however, admitted he didn't want to continue the fight. He decided that admitting defeat was the best option and that a fight was unnecessary since his conscience was clear. Chen Yuerui laughed, saying that Yue Sheng was mistaken if he thought he could avoid the taste of defeat. He needed to learn what it felt like to fall and what it felt like to be vulnerable. The boys started shouting and calling out to others because everyone knew the fifth prince was about to fight Yue Sheng. They were all excited and couldn't wait for the fight to begin. Everyone around was delighted as everyone was expecting a spectacular clash. The prince's friends were in high anticipation, predicting that a real spectacle would soon begin. Yue Sheng, trying to avoid the fight, began to run, but the others prevented him from leaving, pushing him back. The prince was already ready to strike the first blow to begin the fight. Yue Sheng tried to defend himself, using all his strength to repel the attacks, while the prince continued to insist on his own, not giving him the slightest chance. The prince continued to provoke Yue Sheng, asking why he was only defending himself. He insisted that Yue Sheng should attack, not defend, if he wanted to win. Yue Sheng knew he couldn't act recklessly. He was lost in thought, recalling his older brother's advice to be careful in a fight. He knew he had to resist, but at the same time he had to restrain himself. His brother had told him more than once that he needed to remain sane and not rush into battle without reason. Elsewhere in the sacred magic department, the eunuch reported that they now had to obtain the prince's permission to test the mistress's ability, which concerned his daughter. He insisted that the prince should allow further research into the sixth prince's abilities, and therefore asked him to return home since everything had already been decided. Huiming supported these words, confirming that he had used the powers of the sacred beast, and now asked for his sister to return home, leaving all of this behind. Min Ye, however, remained firm, declaring that she would not go anywhere and would continue to fight for her rights, despite the pressure from others. Changjin, seeing the argument, told everyone to stop arguing and decided to find out for himself whether the prince really had the powers of a sacred beast or whether it was just rumors. Changjin started to check when suddenly Chu Pei shouted at him to wait because something was wrong and she didn't want to jump to conclusions. Changjin reported that the examination was complete, and according to him, the prince did not possess the powers of a sacred beast. He suggested that if anyone had any doubts, they should call other cultivators for confirmation. The eunuch said that no more tests were required and that they might have made a mistake, but that the lady must now also undergo an assessment of her ability. Chupei was very disappointed and angry with Chang'an. The eunuch tried to calm her, saying that the test was important and that Lady Minye should be prepared for the next step. The gentleman apologized, explaining that he had to conduct a check and was now waiting for Minye to take part in the next stage of testing. He turned to the prince and asked if he really intended to listen to his greatest command, since the emperor himself had ordered an investigation into this matter. According to the emperor's decree, Lady Minye was required to undergo a test to prove her abilities. This order was inevitable, and her participation in the trials became mandatory. The cunning eunuch, by mentioning the emperor's decree, deliberately uses it to pressure Min. Yet he clearly expects that his words will have a strong influence on her decision. If this causes inconvenience to His Highness, then he is no one to tell him what to do. If he says that the mistress has no ability, then he can certainly be trusted. He, an old slave, does not dare to persecute the mistress. Chang'an didn't understand why they shouldn't conduct an investigation. She believed he probably wanted to collude and deceive the emperor to avoid punishment. This crime is strictly punishable by death, which further angered her. Chupei, seeing her displeasure, nudged her, making her understand that an investigation was necessary. Chang'an agreed that if they did not want to conduct an investigation, then she would take on the task herself. Not wanting to be an accomplice to their criminal conspiracy, the master was very angry with her for her actions. However, after conducting an investigation, he reported that Ms. Minye also lacked the power of a sacred beast just like the others. The eunuch was completely horrified, and not believing it, asked how it was even possible that she did not have this power if she was considered an important figure in this house. He asked her to see for herself what had happened and to also carry out the necessary checks to ensure the accuracy of the results, because something was clearly wrong. Chupei tried to stop her, not wanting the situation to worsen, but Chang'an insisted, arguing that she had to do it as she couldn't be wrong in her conclusions. The man overseeing the inspection declared that it seemed the lady truly lacked the ability of a sacred beast. This caused even greater discontent among everyone present. The eunuch, unwilling to accept vague answers, was furious. He demanded a clear and precise conclusion, asking whether she had the ability, not just speculation. The man again said that he would conduct another check to be sure, and only then would he give a final answer so that there would be no doubt about his words. After a second examination, nothing had changed. The man reported that the lady indeed possessed no magical abilities, as had been stated previously. Mr. Li angrily asked if this was true and demanded a precise answer. He began to suspect that the man might be trying to deceive him by concealing the truth. But the man replied that if he was lying, heaven and earth would reel. He added that if the master didn't believe him, he could ask other magicians to check. Chupei, increasingly irritated, shouted at the man to ask if there was anything else he wanted to say, and why he couldn't just admit a fact that was already obvious. The man fell to his knees and began to beg for forgiveness. He had been deceived by Zhao Wujing and believed that the sixth prince had magical abilities. His incompetence had almost led to irreparable consequences. He asked the master to fry over the insignificant life of a miserable slave. The prince has incomparable prudence. He thanks him because with his help, he, an unworthy slave, did not commit evil. Therefore he bows before him. Even if he was deceived by the master and believed that the sixth prince had the power of the sacred beast as the head of the sacred magic department, he would face the death penalty. Not to mention that he groundlessly accused his daughter he would not have enough heads to pay for his sins. The eunuch said that he was worthless, he was blind. His ignorance had reached its limits. His leadership was terrible. He deserved 10,000 deaths, and he just wanted to be given a chance to atone for his guilt. Chupei said that he was happy with the current state of affairs. This time he was saying almost nothing, but warned that if he tried to harm his daughter again, he would not escape punishment. Minye remarked that this meant they could bring the sixth prince home, All of this gave hope that this unpleasant incident would soon be resolved and things would return to normal. The man didn't answer right away, so Chupei nudged him, reminding him that his daughter had asked a question. He was expecting a more specific answer that might clarify the current situation. The man finally replied that of course he agreed. He also requested that security escort the sixth prince to the palace to ensure his safety on the journey. Minye told him they could return now, but the prince was in tears. He was in a state of anxiety, unable to calmly process what he had experienced. It had all been too unexpected for him. He was shocked to learn who had saved him, and his father told him they had to go because time was running out. It was time to finish this stage and move on without putting off important matters. The eunuch couldn't be mistaken, and the girl truly did not possess the power of a sacred beast. This became obvious despite all the previous doubts and guesses anyone might have had. Chupei became intrigued and asked Chanjin what it was and why they hadn't detected the sacred beast's power in his daughter. The question was important and required an explanation. Chanjin replied that while training her, he had sealed her powers with a secret technique. This step was done at his own discretion to hide her true power from prying eyes. Thus, only high-level magic could detect her magical abilities. Ordinary mages would be powerless against such a technique. This explained why no one noticed her power. Chupei was completely confused and couldn't understand why he hadn't been told about this sooner. After all, he'd seen how frightened the gentleman was when he learned the truth, and that was crucial. Changjin explained that he had acted as he had because he deserved it. He had brought Chupei here without his consent, and now all those repressed memories had returned to him, influencing his actions. Changjin declared that he demanded a duel, and Chupei was shocked, asking again, because he felt as if he had just heard something incredible. It was completely unexpected. Minye asked the teacher if this meant that even if she used the sacred beast's power, she would still remain undetectable. She wanted to confirm the details before taking any action. Haiming said it was really cool because his sister had become even stronger. He was happy with her success and proud of her development, which brought him a lot of positive emotions. Her father told her she should have been more reserved when she was nearly discovered. He was worried about her, and his heart was literally breaking, with worry that things could have ended differently. Minya promised she would be careful and didn't want him to worry about her. She felt responsible, but at the same time she tried to reassure him, promising to be attentive. A lot had happened today, and now they needed a good rest. They could eat back at the palace and relax a bit after everything that had happened, which had taken so much of their energy. Minya said she didn't agree with this. Despite everything that had happened, she still wanted to return to school. The prince said he would go with his little sister, supporting her in this decision. Her father agreed and said he'd meet her after school. Meanwhile, the fifth prince continued to beat Yue Sheng, and this incident wasn't ignored, adding to the tension. The fifth prince said that Yue Sheng was too weak, and before he shouted very fiercely, but he was such a rude person. Everyone started saying that the fifth prince was so strong that the guy didn't have the strength to fight back. This weakling had been very brave before. Chen Yurui was confident, claiming that defeating 10 more weaklings like this would be no problem. He was so confident that he didn't even doubt his victory. Yurui, being an idiot, didn't realize that if Min Yi and Huiming hadn't been in danger, he would have long ago torn him to pieces. Giving him no chance of victory, it would have been a complete rout. The fifth prince said Yue Sheng was a weakling who couldn't even train properly. He strongly advised Yue Sheng to devote more time to training before such a duel. At this moment, someone approached Yurui and told him to stay put. When he turned around, he saw Min Ye standing before him with a serious expression. Yurui was indignant, asking who this arrogant person was, who dared to call him by his name and who even dared to treat him like that, not deserving even the slightest respect. Minye finally returned, and Yue Xing was relieved, believing they were all safe and sound. He felt relieved that everything had gone without any major problems. Minye raised her hand to signal that everything was going according to plan, and this reassured Yue Xing. He felt more at ease knowing that the situation was under control and they were on the right track. Chen Huiming declared that he had come to confront the fifth prince. He was serious and prepared to demonstrate his strength in battle regardless of the possible consequences. Yurui couldn't understand what was going on, dismissing Huiming as a pathetic little cockroach. Trying to challenge him to a duel, he was certain it was just a stupid prank. Huiming noticed that everyone could now see how scared his older brother was and that he was, in fact, a coward. Huiming relished the moment his enemy surrendered. The fifth prince, greatly enraged, asked if Huiming truly wanted to die. So confident was he of his victory, he hadn't expected such a challenge and was prepared for aggression. Huiming pulled out a huge firecracker, similar to the one the fifth prince had used against him. It looked terrifying and was ready to strike. Yurui immediately began speaking, accusing Huiming of being mean for challenging him to a one-on-one fight. He was so irritated that he could barely contain his emotions. The boy couldn't figure out where Huiming had gotten the fireworks, but he threw one at him with a smile, causing a flash. Yurui was stunned, not expecting such a turn of events. Huiming admitted to being a scoundrel, but he didn't consider it a problem. His actions hadn't changed, and he had no intention of stopping there, despite the accusations. After this, the fifth prince fell to the ground, and his friends rushed to lift him up, trying to find out how he was feeling and what had happened, trying to help him. Yurui continued to call him a stinking cockroach, unable to understand how he dared to humiliate him. He ordered his friends to beat the crap out of him without wasting time on conversation. Huiming was prepared for their attacks and had already taken out a large supply of fireworks. He said they could attack and was ready to meet their onslaught, confident of victory. Huiming couldn't figure out when he'd managed to light all the fireworks, or where he'd gotten so many of them. He continued to act, wasting no time in reflecting on what was happening. Everyone started to panic and run away, because the fireworks were indeed dangerous and about to explode. The fifth prince believed they were simply traitors who had abandoned him. Yu Xing's younger brother approached him, and his words left no room for doubt. He wanted him dead. This unexpected act shocked everyone nearby. Yurui tried to dissuade the sixth prince, but he wouldn't listen and immediately began attacking him with fireworks. The response was swift and brutal. Yurui felt intense pain. His screams rent the air, but unfortunately no one came to his aid. He was alone and no one tried to protect him. At that moment, Huiming realized he was feeling something unusual and pleasant. He realized he might want to repeat this act again and again. Yurui couldn't come to terms with what was happening. He started running away, promising to tell his mother everything. He was sure his life would now be over. Minye approached Yue Xing, trying to understand how he had managed to beat his brother so badly. She was stunned by what was happening, unsure what to think. The boy explained to her that her confusion was unfounded. He couldn't add to their already difficult situation, and her older brother had asked her to keep everything a secret. Huiming, addressing Yue Xing, praised him for his resilience. He acknowledged that the prince had indeed endured much and was truly amazed by his endurance. However, Yue Xing reassured him, saying nothing terrible had happened. Quarrels between them were commonplace, and even avenging his offense brought him satisfaction. The concubine recorded everything that happened. Her thoughts filled with doubt. She couldn't understand what these people were doing and believed her dog was much more useful. The eunuch had no choice but to ask her for help. He declared that the old slave who had betrayed her trust deserved punishment and immediate death. The concubine was frustrated with the situation. Even with the help of the bastard from Linggong, they couldn't cope, and she knew she would now have to take matters into her own hands. Soon a man came running to her with photographs, telling her that she had to intercede for her son. He was desperate, and she couldn't leave him without support. She immediately hugged him and began asking him what had happened. Her voice was full of excitement as she searched for answers to the questions that tormented her. He said Huming nearly destroyed him with fireworks. He nearly flew into the air feeling extreme pain. He couldn't believe what had happened to him. The woman couldn't contain her anger. She exclaimed that this was madness and couldn't believe anyone would dare treat her son so cruelly. Determined to act decisively, she made her decision. This time the sixth prince would not go unpunished, and she was going to do everything to punish him. Yuerui, while at school, reminded her not to let him escape. He knew his fate now depended on her actions. The concubine became determined. She ordered them to go to the school, taking their guards with them to end this conflict once and for all. Haiming was at the Taishu school, wondering whether concubine Jin would truly arrive or if she might already be here. He wasn't sure what was happening at that moment. He was right. The concubine had already arrived and was loudly calling his name, summoning him. Her voice resonated in the air, and Huming was nervous, waiting to see how everything would unfold. When the boy saw her, he felt relieved. However, the woman immediately began to reproach him, asking how he dared harm her son. She was completely outraged. Huiming was not just the elder brother, but also the emperor's son, holding the title of prince. His status far exceeded that of anyone of low birth, such as that man from Lengong. The boy simply laughed at her, complaints mocked her, and even tried to tease her. He'd picked up this behavior from Yue Sheng, who always taught him how to handle such situations. The woman was completely perplexed by this behavior. She couldn't understand how he could behave so provocatively and disrespectfully toward her son, who in her opinion deserved respect. She considered him a degenerate, a man who didn't appreciate being treated well. So she decided to teach him a lesson to make him understand his place in the world. She ordered her guards to take immediate action, demanding that Huming be beaten senseless. The boy, realizing he was about to be punished, began to run away, trying to avoid trouble. The guards immediately gave chase. The woman gave orders not to let him go, but to catch up and not let him escape even a step. She couldn't let him escape without consequences. Haiming knew he had to follow his sister's instructions and began running toward the nearest tree. He hoped it would buy him at least a little time. He deftly climbed the tree, then used its branches to quickly leap over the fence and land on the other side. He knew he had to act quickly to avoid being caught. However, everything that was happening seemed like a real curse. The guards were keeping up with him, so they decided to leave through the main exit to continue their pursuit of the boy. Xingmu was certain the Empress would leave through this very exit, so they decided to wait for her here. Yuesheng took his hint and prepared for the next step. Yuesheng expecting Huming to bring concubine, Jin eagerly awaited her arrival. They planned to anger her so that things would unfold according to their plan. At that moment, Yuesheng was the first to notice the Empress approaching. He immediately informed his elder brother so he could be prepared for the next step. Xingmu became wary, realizing that the sixth prince and concubine Jin had not yet arrived. He knew something must have gone wrong and their plan could be ruined. He immediately announced that they hadn't arrived yet, so they needed to somehow delay the Empress to prevent any unforeseen consequences. Time was at a premium. Yuesheng wondered what he could do to delay the Empress for at least a few minutes. He quickly came up with a plan that could help them in this situation. Suddenly, Yuesheng fell right in front of the Empress's carriage. He began complaining that he was in great pain, hoping this would distract her attention and detain her for at least a little while. The Empress noticed her carriage had stopped and, intrigued, decided to investigate. She didn't understand what had happened and wanted to know. The maid explained that it was the prince's second son who had fallen right in front of their carriage. The Empress ordered an immediate check on him to determine what had happened. The Empress ordered her maids to immediately examine the boy and determine his condition. She couldn't ignore such a situation even if it was unexpected. The maid approached Yuesheng and began to inquire about his well-being, trying to understand his problem. She noticed that his complexion was unhealthy. Yuxing replied that he was in terrible pain, barely able to speak, and that he was in great pain. He was complaining of pain to create the desired impression. However, the boy noticed his brother signaling that he had a stomach ache. Yuexing decided to continue playing and began complaining of even more intense pain to prolong the delay. He said he was so hungry that he was starting to feel dizzy and couldn't go any further. He tried to make sure they kept detaining him. The Empress realized what was going on and ordered some pastries brought to him. She believed this would ease his condition and perhaps help him recover. Yuexing was delighted by the delicious pastries they brought him. He savored every bite, knowing the Empress would decide what was best for him and they would be able to continue on their journey. The maid thought he was feeling better, and seeing that he looked better, she suggested he get up and continue on his way. She thought his condition had returned to normal. However, Yuexing, continuing to play his part, said he was still hungry and wanted more cakes. He tried to look as if he couldn't get enough. Yuexing was shocked by how many cakes they brought him and even surprised that they were all meant for him. He hadn't expected the situation to unfold so favorably. Minya noticed that the sixth prince hadn't arrived yet. She began to suspect that concubine Jin might have already captured him, which would complicate matters further. But soon she saw the prince running toward them, shouting her name. This calmed her somewhat, as it seemed the situation was now returning to normal. He ran up complaining that he'd been running non-stop and was very tired. Minya reassured him, telling him he was doing well, but they found themselves surrounded by guards. Guards surrounded them, giving them no chance to escape. At that moment, the concubine peered out of her carriage and declared that he couldn't leave because everything was under control. Xingmu, seeing that everything was going according to plan, was glad they had reached their destination. The guards were already here and the situation was becoming increasingly tense. The maid, noticing that Yuexing's complexion had changed again, asked if he was all right as he looked unwell. She suggested he stop eating, but Yuexing insisted he was still hungry and continued to beg for more food. Xingmu, realizing it was time to move on, reminded him that the Empress needed to go to the Buddhist temple. Yuexing was pleased that he had finally had his fill and continued to savor his victory. He was glad he had avoided any unnecessary trouble. Xingmu, apologizing for the inconvenience, noted that the Empress Dowager had been very kind and that they would not detain her any longer.